Welcome to the Spiritual Underground Podcast. This is Nan, as always, coming to you from my little wood shop in the backyard of my New Albany, Indiana home, also known as DTM Enterprises, where I do my woodworking out here and any kind of jobs that I have out in the world that might require shop work rather than field work I bring in here. And then when we have a podcast, I brush off this table and my guest and I sit across from it, and we deliver these messages of this 12-step recovery deal to you folks out there. And I appreciate y'all listening. DTMWW.net is my little business. You can email Dan at DTMWW.net. Find me on Facebook. My phone number's all over the place. You can find me easy enough. 12-Step Spiritual Recovery is a book by James Christopher Cohn. It can be found on Amazon. Check that out. And Darren Frank's music is wrapped around this podcast. And considering the current virus crisis going on now, Darren cannot have guests. So he's still in the rehab joint with his physical rehab. Continue to send prayers to him. He is doing well. So we'll get on with the show here. I might have said this before, and I think I have on the podcast, but I'm in some podcasting network groups that are the biggest thing is people are A, looking for more listeners, and B, looking for guests. And guests, the niche I have chosen to do my podcast around almost has an unlimited amount of guests available to me, and I begin to wonder why I haven't had ones on sooner. Will give a little background here. And I just looked this up the other day because I was wanting to talk about it. I shared about it in a meeting the other night. My very first AA meeting was on March 23rd, 2011. I'll back up. That actually wasn't. I was court ordered to do some AA when I was in my teens. But the first time I came in with that third tradition in my hip pocket, a desire to stop, was on that March 23rd, 2011 date. And I had no idea what I was doing. I looked on the church directory, kept on staring me in the eyes every Sunday morning, and I kept on seeing that AA meeting listed in there, and it said, "Call Joe." So when I hit the wall and called my doctor and did some stuff, signed up for some treatment, and I called Joe to see what I needed to do to go join this group, whether there's an application or what was going to be needed. Did I need to show up early? And I pulled up. He laughed at me, and he still laughs at me when he sees me remembering that phone call that night. And I pulled up to the church here local, and I did put my car in reverse 3 or 4 times and put it back in the parking spot, and finally got the gumption up to walk in this meeting. And the very first person I ran into was my guest today. And I'm I'm not. I am 100% certain that Becky here is the first person to say, "Hi, my name is," and I'm an alcoholic. And she had a big smile on her face and looked happy to see me. I'm sure she realized she had not seen me before. We get that little newcomer thing going where you're pretty sure this person hasn't been here before. And so that was the first hand that was stuck out to me. And it's interesting to keep on staying in contact with people over those amount of years. Becky has been, in my eyes, like a rock. You know, every time I bounced in and out of AA and came back to those meetings, there she still was. A number of folks continued to do that and proved to me that when they were saying keep coming back, they really meant it. They weren't just spouting that stuff off. And I stumbled for years, and I'm sure I would be going missing for a while. And when you go missing out of the meetings, people know usually what's up. You usually didn't move or anything like that. Sometimes you did, but I was back out to my business, and I'd come back in and get white chips and do that dance for a while. And then, for whatever reason, the magic happened in early 2015, and I finally got some traction in this thing. And I know that Becky was witness to that little journey to some extent. And I've always had a warm spot in my heart for her. She was just always that just that quintessential AA love and that happy to see you every time you came back. Every single time was a smile on your face like you just was here last night. I've told my other friends, and I hope this doesn't come off sideways, but it's like a maternal influence to me. It's like a motherly type of love type of deal going on where they see you back again, and it's like it just warmed my heart every time, and it still does. And not too long ago, I invited her to come on the podcast with a little bit of intrepidation, wondering if maybe that wouldn't be something she'd want to do. And she quickly said, yes, I'd love to. So how are you doing today, Becky?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful day, and we almost made it through the end of this day.
Almost.
Day at a time,
yeah,
right?
Days at a time.
Great way to end the day with somebody that you've been connected with in this program for a long time, and that spiritual connection is important to me, too. So where do you want me to start? All the way back in the very beginning?
I always ask people for their sobriety date because that is really one of the most important days in my life today.
To the best of my recollection.
Yeah. I did have a guy sit here and said his was either March the 14th or 15th. He did not plan to get sober that day.
I believe my sobriety date is January the 12th of 2007.
That's what I have in my records.
Mm-hmm. I believe that's the date because I had not yet become a daily drinker. And once I decided I was going to get serious about getting sober and join this fellowship, I had to roll back the tape to try to figure out what was the last day I actually did drink, because that's one thing they ask you in your home group.
Yeah, it seems to be important.
To write it down. And so I had to actually roll back the tape and come to the conclusion that this had to be the day based on my experience that I will share during the story. It'll get a little bit more clear when you hear that part of the story. But I started out in life as a very fearful child, and I had no reason to be that way. And to this day, I would say if I were born at a later time, I probably would have been diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder because I remember being fearful as a child. My first real memory of being very afraid was in a Catholic church before we tore that one down and built a new one. And I wasn't old enough to go to communion yet, and I must have been maybe 5. The whole family got up, went to communion, and I was sitting in that seat by myself, and I could see that great big statue of Jesus with the blood pouring out of his heart, and scared the bejesus out of me. I mean, to this day, I don't know why they would do that to little kids, but that scared me, and that was my first real memory of fear. And I don't have a lot of memories of early childhood other than maybe that one and the joy of having many brothers and sisters, because being in the Catholic family that I was in, I'm second oldest of 8 kids, grew up in the south end of Louisville.
I was getting ready to ask that.
Yeah, mom was stay-at-home mom, dad was a Louisville police officer, and so as far as I am concerned, it was a happy childhood. Other than I've always had fear. From what I was told, and I have no memory of this either, I cried every day when they put me in school the first grade. You didn't have to go to kindergarten back then. And I was my birthday's at the end of the year, so I went to first grade at 5 years old, and I cried every single day they put me in there. Again, I have no recollection of that. But my mom tells me that they said if she's still crying when she comes back after Christmas break, you're keeping her out for a year, you know. But magically I had turned 6 over Christmas break, and I was ready for first grade, I guess. So I didn't cry after that, and I remember having fear when I would learn about a disease, that I was going to get it early on. My mother was always running me to the doctor to prove to me I didn't have cancer or something, you know. So God love her. I don't know how she put up with that, because my older sister, who's a year older than I am, didn't have those fears, and I don't know why I did, but I did. So I was either blessed or cursed with a highly sensitive system that made me aware of things that may or may not be true. But anyway, so I go through, the childhood with a lot of joy, a lot of brothers and sisters, a lot of responsibilities, being second oldest of 8, and helping out Mom's little helper, because my sister and I both took on that role, but a lot of joy because we had a lot of fun as kids. I remember laughing so hard the coke comes out your nose. I don't know if you ever had that experience, but that one I remember. It does burn. So we had good times, and we had good times, and I went to school, and I had, fun because I like people. I'm very social. I had, I was social in the respect that I had a lot of friends, but didn't have a lot of really close friends. Because I think, looking back on that, when you have such a loving family unit, you're just as comfortable at home as you are with friends. And I had enough siblings close enough to my age that I didn't have to form really close bonds with other people, because I had that love and that friendship and that camaraderie at home. Because I don't feel like that I was one of those people that said, I never really felt like I was close to anybody because I didn't feel like I measured up. I've heard people say that. Mm-hmm. That's not the way I felt. So I'm just assuming it's because I had that love and camaraderie at home with a lot of kids close to my age and didn't have to have that special bond with any one person. But, you have your friends at this age and that age, and you kind of you change your friends as you age. And long about high school, I changed the friends that I ran with, because the one friend that I used to hang out with all the time was madly in love with any Army guy she would see coming down the pike, because that was during the Vietnam War, and there were buses and buses of Army fellows coming in and out of Louisville all the time. And she just wanted to get hung up with boys a lot earlier than I was ready to do that. So I kind of changed the people I was running with, and one of the ladies I was running with was same age as I am, and her dad was also in the same profession as mine. So, and then the other one around the corner was a year younger than us, but she had a big Catholic family, 8 kids, and so we all just kind of hung around together. And it was her sister, who was older, that introduced me to alcohol. Not that we didn't have it in my family. We were Catholics. They did drink. My dad had parties where they drank, changeover parties, they called them, because the police, they were on a swing shift. And apparently once a month when they would change shifts, somebody had to have a party at their house. So I remember a bunch of cops at my house playing poker in the backyard and drinking beer. But alcohol wasn't a daily part of our home life. But this friend of mine and her older sister, who also had a couple of older brothers that I didn't realize at the time, had much worse home life than I ever would have imagined, and so consequently they drank. And so my first beer was with my friend's brother, who was dating my sister at the time, and hanging out with a bunch of people in the neighborhood. There was a bunch of people in our neighborhood, the demographics were just such, there were kids there all the time. And all the guys played basketball at my house, because my dad was smart enough to know we want our kids at home. He's a cop. We want them where we can see them. So we had the ping pong table. And it was the kids at our house all the time. You'd go home from school, go down the basement, and there'd be nobody there that was related to you, but there'd be 20 kids in the basement, right? But Mom and Dad were really really good about letting kids hang out at our house, and that was great. Everybody loved coming to our house. So had that first beer, and I just had one, right? And I don't remember thinking a whole lot of it, other than, it's a beer, and everybody was drinking it, so I had one, and don't remember having any fear that I was going to get in trouble, or remember having any, oh my God, this is the answer for me, because I didn't have social anxiety. I had fear, but I didn't have social anxiety. So, it was just something everybody was doing, so I drank one and I went home, and so I didn't really have alcoholic tendencies early in my life, but beer was always there, and the people we ran with would drink beer, and the guy that I hooked up with the first time when I was finally ready to have a boyfriend was somebody just made me laugh so hard you could not be around him. And so he also came from a pretty dysfunctional family, and I think his father was already dead, and his mother was a severe alcoholic, and there was a lot of drama in that family I didn't know about till years later either. But
and it made him funny.
It made him, he we got married when I was 18. 18?
Wow.
Yeah, 18, and 10 months later I was leaving him because he was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I didn't know that till I married him, but I was just a kid. They say you're an adult at 18, but they say your brain doesn't develop till you're 25, so you figure that out.
Yeah, I thought I was grown up at 18, but
Oh yeah,
I learned later.
Adults, didn't we? So anyway, that marriage didn't last very long, and I moved back home. My mom and dad didn't want me marrying him in the first place, but what can they do? I married him a couple weeks after I turned 18, right? So I moved back home, and my mother insisted that I get my marriage annulled because I was Catholic, and she wanted to be sure I didn't go to hell, and so I did, and, did whatever it took to get the marriage annulled. So my mother'd be happy. In the meantime, I get fixed up with another guy, and he is the nicest guy on the planet. Again, he was one of those guys that made me laugh. And I am one of these kind of kids that is always serious and always worried about what I need to be doing. Rule follower. I'm a rule follower. Everything, I have to do what I'm supposed to do, and I have to make plans, and I have to be sure it's perfect. And I understand that's part of trying to handle some sort of anxiety, but you hear that more from people, in my experience, and maybe it's just because of the people I run with, from needing that sense of order because you come from a chaotic family.
Yeah.
But that was not the case with us. It might have been chaotic because there was 8 of us, but it wasn't chaotic because there was abuse or, none of that.
Not the chaos most people think about when you say that and apply it to family.
Yeah. And it
a lot going on, but.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. So now that's my part of the story because I'm one of the older people, and I go back home and just started. I dated a couple guys, obviously, but then this one guy that made me laugh really hard and took me fishing. I love to go fishing. He was in my life. We had just started dating when my dad got killed in an accident. So I think I was 19 by then.
On the job?
Mm-hmm. Got killed on the job, but he had already retired, and 6 months later got killed on his new job.
Oh.
So consequently, the big insurance policy that was taken out to protect us if he got killed on the job got canceled right before he got killed on the job. So anyway, Mom didn't do that bad. She had enough kids left that Social Security, helped pay her enough money to feed everybody, and eventually she found another good old boy that. God bless him, took on my mom with those kids. And he was good to us, but he liked to drink too. I mean, he'd drink a case of beer a day. And good old boy, and good to us, and made me feel safe, and I always knew he'd knock the heck out of somebody if they try to hurt one of his kids, including me. Right? Yeah. So that was nice, and so because I looking back on it, I would say I was playing musical chairs when my dad got killed, and I sat down, and there was the guy that I married, the next one. All right. And so he was a fun guy. We were good friends. And I can only say this about me, but as this young lady felt like I was supposed to get married, right? I was supposed to. That's what you do.
That's what you do.
And so I did. I mean, we dated for a little while. We moved in together, and living in sin, as some people would think at the time. And that eventually we got into Amway. I don't know if you know what that is.
Yep,
it's a multi-marketing system, and we got into Amway. And if we made it to a certain level, they were going to send us on a trip to Ada, so we better get married because they won't let us go on a trip together if we're not married. So that's kind of why we decided to do it. So we got married, and we had a good time. We had a really good time, and we ran around with a bunch of people in Amway, and we didn't really drink during that period of time because they just the group we ran with didn't drink, right? And not that I wouldn't. If somebody gave me a beer, I might have drank, but we just didn't do that. It just wasn't part of what we did. So we did that for a while, and then that didn't make us enough money, and we went in an economic downturn, and he was being laid off every other week, and then we were going to move to Texas. And long story short, he moved back from Texas. He came back from Texas. He and another guy went down there to get jobs, and then my girlfriend and I were going to go down there, and we were going to live happily ever after in Texas. But in Texas, they couldn't get jobs that were making as much money as they were making here, but we were just laid off for a while, right? So they came back and they said, if at that time I wasn't working because I was doing that Amway gig, and
it's a little bit like work, ain't it?
Well, it was. It was work, but it was fun work. But wasn't
but
a steady
payroll
paycheck.
Job.
Wasn't a steady paycheck, and nobody in my family had ever been in sales. So, that was my experience in lieu of college. I didn't go to college. I got an Amway, and they taught me a whole lot about sales and business and enterprise. I mean, we went to all the training classes, all the
Right,
stuff
yeah.
you could get to learn this stuff. And that's where I got into all of those positive thinking, Zig Ziglar, see you at the top, and all that. And, and he says you just build a better you. And all of those things that I read talked about how you get rid of your bad habits and start developing good ones. And so, remember I said as a rule follower,
Yeah.
I'd follow the rules, right? So I was clicking along, and this guy that I was married to said, why don't you come back? When I come back from Texas, why don't you get a job, and you work in that job for a couple years so we can save up enough money to buy a house. By that time, maybe I won't be laid off anymore. Okay, fine. Well, I get a job, and for the first time in a while, I got my own money. Well, that's fun, right? And so what I realized, when I hired into this company, and I'm still at this company today, by the way, I've been there 40 years.
Wow.
And I hired in this company. As a young kid, I said, I don't know what you sell here, but I know you sell something. So whenever I can, I want to move into the sales department. So they hired me on the switchboard, paying me $750 a month. And here I am 40 years later, still at the same firm, because they've been real good to me. But anyway, so I had my own money. And the one thing about sales, for those of us that have been in that career, they like to party.
Yep.
And again, I wasn't opposed to alcohol. Just in Amway, we just didn't run around with a lot of people that drank. But I would go out, and some of the older ladies would take me out for lunch on Friday, and they'd have a cocktail. All right. So,
Yeah.
Okay, sounds like fun. After a hard day's work, a lot of those guys would go across the bar to I can't remember the name of that little bar in downtown Louisville they used to go to, and we'd go over and have a couple beers.
Yeah, walk across the street after work.
And they did it all the time, and so I just started following suit there. And the gentleman that I was married to, really, really good guy, that I was married to, his father was a really bad alcoholic, like one of those that lived on the streets, and
Oh, wow.
they found him dead on the street and sidewalk, and one of those that drank, the story goes he would drink mouthwash, or
Yeah.
if he couldn't get it, he was going to drink whatever he could get.
There was going to get some alcohol in that system somehow or another, in one form or another.
And he died when he was 54. And so that particular person that I was married to was concerned that someday I could become an alcoholic. So he was, just worried, and rightfully so. I mean, if I grew up in a household and saw that,
You'd be a little gun shy.
You would. So he was concerned, and he liked to drink, but he would always say, well, I don't see any point in drinking unless you get drunk. So he didn't drink unless he was going to get drunk. And that was never my intention. My intention was to drink because the one thing that I did notice, and you've heard me say this in meetings, is it became my liquid courage and my liquid patience. And in retrospect, the patience now, I know clearly now after this long of time of working the steps and evaluating myself, it wasn't the patience that I needed, it was the lack of thinking. And so if I were bored, I'd have to shut it off. Because I didn't know that it was my thinking that was my problem. So we fast forward the clock through a 20-year relationship that we ended the marriage. I should say I ended the marriage after 21 years. And during that period of time, I had a son, and I started really evaluating the quality of the relationship, and again doing a lot of internal work and reading a lot of things and evaluating everything. I realized that I married that man for the wrong reasons. I married that man because my dad died. He was a really, really good friend. But young ladies, I think, in their quest to find the man, because we're told we have to be married, we're not told that. The implication is if we're not married, there must be something wrong with us.
The societal norm certainly is to be married.
Or at least it was back then.
Well, there's not a lot of difference in the men either, because I need a girl on my arm.
You need a girl on your arm, but you don't have to be married.
No.
We have to be married,
Yeah.
right? You need a girl on your arm. There's a big difference, and that's where the whole commitment thing comes in. That's funny, I think, now, but back then it wasn't funny.
Is.
So, anyway, if you could go back, sometimes my mother gave me my senior high school picture in a frame recently, and if you go back and talk to that young lady today, you say, I know you think you got to have a husband right now, but why don't you wait till you really know what it is you need in a man? You need to know what you need in a man, and so I kind of finally figured out what that is now, and doesn't mean we need to be married, but I know what I need in a man, and so I was very uncomfortable in the marriage because I wasn't getting what I needed in the marriage, and that man of mine, he was a lovely man, but he would always be fond of saying, "You're as happy as you want to make up your own mind to be." Well, I know I started in AA, but I have also been to Al-Anon, and when I could just see an alcoholic husband saying that to the wife. Because you say, yeah, right. But that's kind of how I felt. I was very resentful because some of the things that I was unhappy with were the behavior he could change if he wanted to, and was not unreasonable request. So I started getting unhappy because that was always the answer. I gave him a book one time that was recommended to the group of people we ran with in Amway, called The Man of Steel and Velvet, and was recommended to the men to read. So I bought it and gave it to him. He said, "I'm not reading that." He said, "I'm not changing for you or anybody else." Well, that should have told me right there, maybe that was not the right man for me. But I can remember one time during the marriage, he said, "You've changed." And I said, "Well, I certainly hope so," right?
Right.
As we get older, we should get wiser, and we should change, right? So over time, I was disenchanted, and the song that you play before all of these podcasts and after at the end is a really good song because it talks about how you always tried to be what they wanted you to be.
Yep.
Right. So the concern for me was, oh God, what's my mom going to think if I get divorced the second time? Right. Oh my God, one was bad enough. Fortunately for me, I didn't marry that one in the church, so I didn't have to worry about getting that whole annulment thing done because I was already living in sin as far as the Catholics were concerned, right? So anyway, my alcoholic consumption continued to increase during the career, which became more and more about how much more will you do for the company, because any sales organization is, what are you going to do for me this year? I don't care how good you did last year, you got to do more every year, and anybody that's been in that kind of environment understands that. And so the pressure to do more, to be more, to do more, to be more in the office, along with my fear and my insecurity about just about anything, including not having enough money to feed my family and my child that I now had, and all of that stuff. So my drinking increased, but it was not until, I want to say in my 40s, somewhere along the line, I realized that sometimes I didn't want to stop. It felt like I didn't want to. Sometimes it felt like I didn't want to stop. I didn't realize at the time that it was my body saying, "I'm not letting you stop." And I remember going to one of my friends in the office whose parents were alcoholics, and I said, "I'm starting to wonder what this is about. Most of the time I'll have a couple cocktails and quit, but every now and then I don't want to stop." And she said, why don't you go to an AA meeting? There's one right around the corner over in DuPont, the Token 3 Club used to be.
Yeah.
Right around the corner on Tuesday nights at 6:30, I think. It's a newcomers meeting. Why don't you try it? Maybe you'll learn something. So I go, and I learned a few things, and you go around a table and you'd say, "I'm Becky, I'm an alcoholic," because you're afraid not to.
Right.
Everybody's
That's why I
saying
said it the first time.
So you say it. I didn't know if I was.
Yep.
I was there to learn.
I still remember stumbling through that when you hit me with that day, of going, and it was that monkey see, monkey do kind of thing. It was like, okay, I'm a quick watcher and listener, and I saw that's what I'm supposed to do. Now, today I know I didn't have any idea. I didn't have any idea what an alcoholic was walking in there.
No, you don't. Well, I didn't. I was there to find out more about the program. That was what I was sent there to be. But
that is a trip that you took that advice and did that. I mean, that is really some higher power kind of nudging stuff. Because I mean, who in the world would actually take up that?
Well, I've always
most
wanted
of
to
us
learn.
reject that, right?
No,
I mean, you
I've
tell
always
most
wanted to learn.
alcoholics or somebody budding alcoholic, whatever that, hey, why don't you go to? They're like, oh no,
Let me
you know,
check that
not
out.
me. I
Yeah.
don't need to go there. What are you saying about me? You said, well, yeah, I'll go check it out. Just like the nerd Zig Ziglar seminar.
Yeah, well, it was. So I thought, well, I'll check it out. And I went for a while, and I started running with some people, and because it was early and it was after work, and I didn't have to be home to anybody because by that time I was divorced, and that would be a Tuesday night was the night I didn't have my son. So, well, it worked for me. Yeah, we'll go. And then I started going to dinner with some of these people, and these people just always talking about other people and ragging them out and stuff. I thought, this is not. These are not the kind of people that I'd really want to run with, and then because it was a newcomers meeting, I'd sit because I worked close by, so I'd have to get there, and I'd be sitting in the area where they used to be able to smoke cigarettes and drink Coke and coffee, and I'd meet some people, and they'd say, well, I think I'm gonna get my kids back, and it's like these are not people like me, But I continued to go, and I thought, well, maybe I should get a sponsor and work the steps. I got the book, read the book, and maybe I should get a sponsor and work the steps. So you observe people, and you say, okay, well, this one looks like somebody that I could relate to. I think she was a nurse. And so I asked her to be my sponsor. She's flat out said no. No, that was it. End of paragraph. Well, that's interesting. So I went through the book and kind of did what it said in the book, and tried to work through the steps all by myself because that woman told me no, and so I thought, okay, I'm done. And the experience I had then was I was still going to those meetings, and I had a client who moved to Costa Rica, and when they would come up for Christmas, I would take them out to dinner at Ruth Chris, and we would always meet in the bar and have a glass of wine, and then we'd have dinner. So I went to Ruth Chris, but there was a terrible snowstorm that night, and they beat me there. Even though my office is real close, they beat me there. So they were sitting in the bar when I went in, and I wasn't going to drink because I was going to AA. And the woman hands me the goblet with a great big grin on her face, and she said, I took the liberty of ordering you your favorite wine, and handed me that goblet. And I said, okay, here goes. Boom. Drank that, had another glass of wine with them at dinner, and noticed on the way home I didn't crave it anymore. Because remember, the big book says, if you think you're an alcoholic or you're not sure, go out and try to have a couple cocktails and see if you still crave it. So I didn't. I didn't crave it that night. And I thought, I must not be an alcoholic. So I went home, didn't go back to any more AA meetings, and then so the next several years progressed where I had just enough AA in me to know what to watch for. And I'm very fortunate that most of the client dinners that I have are next door to my office, which is a 30-minute drive from my home. So when I would take a client out for dinner, if I had a couple glasses of wine and then drive home, it started becoming a necessity. I started realizing that every single time I drank wine with clients at dinner, it was all I could do to get home to get more alcohol in me. So I remembered from my AA experience that was the sign that I was headed for trouble. So, step one, I admitted I was an alcoholic. Step one. I took step one once that realization came into my life. And for a long time I tried to think, okay, so if I'm going to quit drinking, how's this going to work, right? I take clients out for dinner, we go to cocktail parties. I'm not sure how this is going to work. So I continued to drink probably for a year during that period of time when I knew I had a problem. I would still not drink and drive. I would go home, and then I'd have some more scotch and sodas while I was reading my book, and I probably got drunk maybe 3 times a week during that time. So long about the fall, I think. I haven't gotten married again, but I've been with the same guy now for 20-something years. And he has 3 sons. And so for purposes of this story, I'm going to call them my stepsons because it's just easier. And if you hear me say my husband, we're not really married, so nobody says she's not telling the truth. But I might call him my husband, So
Labels.
It's just easier to say that.
Right, yeah, than to wiggle around all the other.
Yeah, and so I don't want anybody to think I'm not truthful, but I'll just use those words because it's just easier. So one of the stepsons that I have was struggling and had been struggling for a while with drugs and of course they are master manipulators and I I don't live in the same town, so it was harder for me to see, and I just thought it was a normal teenage rebellion type. He was very argumentative and
a phase.
And and I remember my guy saying, "I thought you were going to divorce me over that kid." And remember, we're not married, but that was the word he used.
Right.
But he says, "I thought you were going to divorce me over that kid." And I said, "Well, truthfully, I just thought it was just he was just being an ornery teenager. I didn't know it was because he had a problem." But when he finally fessed up to having a problem, had a real problem, and asked his dad to send him to rehab. He went to rehab in November of 2006, I think. It was in the fall. And I said, you know what? I think I'll quit drinking. Because one of the things that he would say when he would want to argue about the merits of making pot legal, we didn't know he was doing a lot of stuff, but he would say, well, you'll drink, So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna quit drinking. I know I got a problem. I'm going to start going to Alcohol Anonymous. I had been praying for God to keep me from getting drunk, and he was doing that same thing with the church bulletin, right? Here's your sign for a year, and so I thought I'm going to go with that AA meeting at our church, and those people be different from the ones at the Token Club, right? Because they won't be just coming out of jail. They'd be church-going folks. First guy I saw when I went in was Shag. And those of you who don't know Shag, he's got real long hair, and he got tattoos all over his body. And he, real biker-looking dude, and had the oxygen tank on. And,
even then.
That was the first guy I saw when I walked to the AA group, thinking these people at church are going to be different.
Yeah.
And they were. But there was only about 5 people in that group at the time. It kind of grew into something really special for a while.
Yeah,
and so anyway, I went, and then they said the only requirement for membership was a desire to stop drinking. So I had a desire to stop drinking because my stepson was in rehab, and so I went and said, "Yeah, but I'm probably going to drink at that Christmas party, right? I'm probably going to, but I just have to have a desire to stop drinking." So I went to a training thing, and I drank a couple of cocktails. Then I didn't let myself get drunk. And then I went to a Christmas party. Drank a couple cocktails, did not let myself get drunk. But that was one of those white knuckle things, right? I knew I wanted more, but I didn't because I really did want to stop. And
it kind of put a chill in me to think about those times when I kept myself from getting drunk because of the circumstances needed that.
Right.
And I could do it. And I could also tell myself that also put a little ammo over there. I ain't too bad.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because I can stop.
I'd already admitted
when I really want to.
Yeah, I already admitted I was. And I already knew I wanted to quit drinking. And I had been praying for 2 years for God to help me not get drunk every time I drank. I just didn't understand his first drink got me drunk, right? I didn't understand that until I really got into the program. And I went to rehab that he was at in Atlanta, Georgia. They had a family week. And his dad asked me if I would go, and I said absolutely, because I've known this kid for quite some time by this time, and he felt like one of my kids to me. And so, in fact, I was probably closer to him than the other two because he lived with us more than the other two did. Mm-hmm. So I was real close to this kid, and we went to family week, and that's why I say I don't remember exactly if that date is accurate, because when I came back from that family week knowing I needed to get a sponsor, and I needed to go through the steps with a sponsor, and I needed to do what they were telling me to do in the rooms at Alcoholics Anonymous. So So when I had to come up with my sobriety date, I remembered that I didn't drink on the plane on the way down, right? And I said, okay, let's see, that was a Thursday that I have had. No, I wouldn't have drank that night. I had my son. So I backed up and said that had to be the last time I drank. That's why I'm not real sure about my sobriety date. But anyway, that's what I did. And the one thing that I learned in Family Week was very, very informative to me, and it was the conditions that they taught us in Family Week that would have to be there. And they said, if these things are present, then it's almost 100% a surety that you will turn into an addict of some sort. And one of the things was some sort of a mental disorder, and I would say that anxiety disorder for me was it, right? And then the second thing is some sort of a childhood, teenage trauma, and that would have been my dad getting killed. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing is the availability of your drug of choice, which was for me alcohol, and it was legal, and it was available, and if those conditions are met, there's a real high probability you will turn into an addict at some point. The other interesting thing in that was the idea at the time that the number 4 addictive behavior in the country at the time was exercise.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember me talking about that girlfriend I had in high school when I changed friends, and it was her sister that introduced me to alcohol for the first time. She at one point did become addicted. She told me she got so addicted to running, she got down to 86 pounds, and she was 5'6".
Yeah, I've seen it.
And it seems bizarre to me, just like getting addicting to gambling seems bizarre to me because you're not ingesting that,
right?
But apparently you do.
And by all means, it's good for you, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, so you can't really, tell you're drinking yourself to death, or you're doing something. You're drinking too much, you're shooting drugs, you're taking too many pills, you're doing, but
it's amazing.
I'm exercising.
Mm-hmm. But it creates the chemicals,
yep.
Just like gambling will create a chemical in your body. You don't have to ingest it; it creates it. So I was fascinated by that.
Yeah, the runner's high.
Fascinated by that. And so anyway, I came back from that Family Week, and I said, okay, I'm going to go to this meeting I'm going to go to a bunch of meetings, and I'm going to try to find speaker meetings where women are speaking, so I can figure out who I want to be my sponsor. So that's how I chose my sponsor. I heard my sponsor speak and tell her story down at New Albany's Smoke and Token Club.
That's calculated stuff. That's really thinking through this AA thing. It's
that's me. That's the way I live my whole life, right? I mean, like I have to plan everything. I'm a planner for a living, so I have to plan everything, and I have to do all the work, and that's just that's the way I roll. But
find women's meetings so I can stalk a sponsor.
I didn't specify women's meetings, but if I wanted to hear
women
a woman speaker, right? So I heard her tell her story, and so I thought, well, I can relate to her because she had some similarities in her story that I had, and so she put me to work right away. I mean, right away. She was really good for me because she had me doing some serious workbook step study stuff. It wasn't just let's go through the book and read it and do what it says in the book. It was like this great big workbook, real thick thing, and I not only had to read it, I had to write it out, and then I had to answer the questions. And I was fussing about, what the hell do I have to write it for? It's right here in print. Why do I have to write it out? She told me later, she said, I figure I really had to keep you working because you're going to be wanting to go way too fast, right? So, oh, God. And so anyway, she was real good for me, and we'd meet every Wednesday before I did my home group and go through the steps, and she'd say, it's not good enough. You're going to have to go back and do another one. And she was good for me because she knew that I'm kind of this, let's get her done. Okay, I'm done. Check the box, that's done. I'm done with that. I don't have to do that anymore. But I have to tell you, I forgot to mention one key element of me being ready the second time after having gone as the informational quest the first time. There's a guy that I know, and I'm not going to say much about him because if somebody had listened to this story, they might be able to figure out who it is. And anyway, let's just say he was probably the biggest alcoholic I knew. the one that I would see in such a light that I would say, man, that guy's really got a problem, right?
I get it, yeah.
One of those that would just wreak havoc. And I hadn't seen him for a while, but I'd heard he got sober, right? So I happened to answer a phone when he called the office one day for somebody else, and they weren't around, and I thought, well, it'd be courteous to answer this phone and just take a message. And it was him on the phone. I said, daggone it, I heard you got sober. And he said, how'd you do it? And he said, I went to AA. And I said, really? I said, I went to AA, and that didn't seem to work for me. I said, what makes it work for you? And he said, 10, 11, and 12. That was the answer for me. Well, of course it is. I never worked 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
I did it once, thought I was done, checked the box. Right. Remember that? Yeah. I checked the box, done. Didn't have to drink after that second glass of wine that time. I was done with AA. I'd already done all my homework and everything, but I had to do it again. I had to do 10, 11, 12 over and over and over again. So I credit him to this day, and he knows it.
That's cool.
For giving me the magic key that made it work the second time. Getting the sponsor was important, but remembering what he said about having to do 10, 11, and 12 was very instrumental for me. He hooked me up with a woman in Louisville when I first got started that fall, before I found my sponsor, and said, you go to this meeting, she's always there. I went to the meeting, she wasn't there.
Yeah.
I called her first, asked her if she'd be there. Oh, yeah, I'm always there. I went to the meeting, she wasn't there. But they gave me a free big book, and I said, okay, fine. But anyway, it was a delightful meeting, and I saw somebody in there I knew, and it wasn't a bad night, but that's just kind of how it works when you're brand new and you're thinking, well, they told me this. Now,
yeah.
You know how that is.
I do. Yeah.
These guys never tell you the truth in here, right? So
it's like a game,
I
knew
thought so, right?
They was in cahoots. They knew.
Yeah, and they tell you to call them. You got to call me, and they never answered their phone. What the hell is this when they call?
Call me every day, and I get
and they never answer their phone. It's like, I just don't understand this. So, anyway, we go through the process, and and I'm a member of that home group, and I was there. At first, I couldn't go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I had too many other responsibilities, but I went to as many meetings as I could, and I do follow the rules. I did read the big book, and and I'd say, look, I ain't going to 90 meetings in 90 days, and it doesn't say that in the big book. And she said, well, just go to as many meetings as you can. Good. She knew me, right? She knew how to take care of me in her responsibility as my sponsor. She was really good for me. So I continued to go to my home group and loved every minute of it because I am a social person, as you know. Mm-hmm. If somebody walk in the door, I'm going to say hi.
Yep.
And I loved that church, and I loved the group that we were building. And some people came, and that five people, turned into 10, and they turned into 20, and we got to have nice little fellowship there in that church. And then God brings me the women in my life, and the first one I sponsored, we went through the steps. As far as I know, she's still sober, but after about a year, she quit coming. But I've run into her a time or two, and she says she's still sober, and her dad's in the program, so I don't doubt that she is. But she quit coming, and I don't really talk to her. But God had brought me several women, long about year 3, that asked me to sponsor them, that stayed around, and they're still around today, and they don't go to as many meetings as they can because, like all women, they had to get married and have babies because that's just what we have to do, remember? We have to do that. And but we still get together, and we still have our group that we're connected to because of that early sobriety. And me having 3 years at the time to somebody brand new seemed like, how could you possibly get 3 years? And that was just enough time that they could see that they could get there. And I know my sponsor had 15 years when I asked her to sponsor me, and that's what I needed at the time. But apparently those ladies needed what I had at the time. And
yep, definitely.
And that worked for us, and we still have some really strong bonds to this day. I feel like I got daughters because I only have one child, and he's a boy, and my steps are all boys.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Finally got a couple of granddaughters.
That's interesting how God works in that regard too. Huh?
Yeah. I remember I said I had to have a man. He made sure I had a whole bunch of them. So it's like now I know, right?
Yeah,
now I know.
Look at how that opened up this whole this other package though with working with these women though that I'll think of as like daughters. Maybe if you had your own daughters, that maybe wouldn't have been as open.
If I'd had my own daughters, I'd have drank a lot more. I can tell you that much right now. I could
understand that.
I can tell you for me, I'd have been a hard daughter to mother because I just knew everything. Right, that's smarter than everybody. But yeah, I got to understand the angst that I had as a young lady, and because I had those same isms and angst that the young ladies that I sponsored have. At least I can understand them. Doesn't make it easy to be around.
Mm-hmm.
But I can understand them.
They do sure turn a mirror around on you. I find that to be true. The people I work with tell me their stuff, and I'm going, oh man, they might as well be telling me.
But if we are really supposed to be sharing our experience, strength, and hope, then that's what they are.
Yeah.
That's what I am for them, is because they see me as somebody that made it this far, and I'm not dead yet. So, I guess that's part of what the attraction is for the young ladies that are still in my life, and it's nice. It's nice to have those people. But my journey led me, and it always has, if you picked up on any of that, I've always been in that phase of wanting to make myself a better person, starting way back with Zig Ziglar. His book was See You at the Top that I read. And so continuing my journey, I found myself going to Al-Anon meetings some with Tom. And best me not to say any names if I don't want to say the last one, right? So found myself going to meetings every now and then with because of the stepson situation that we had. And I noticed after a while in my progress through the steps that a lot of my issues were Al-Anon issues. I do like to fix, manage, and control things to try to make sure that I don't have to worry. It is a fear-based, but I can see myself a lot of times in that literature about how if they would just do what I think they should, then my life would be better. Right. And it's real easy for me to take any literature of any 12-step program and change the words around to suit what I'm working on. So, we've talked about using the 12 steps for other things, and I love your TSSR work. I hope we continue that because I certainly believe that you're going where we're supposed to be going, and I want to go with you. The thing for me was that I just didn't want to worry, and I realized early on in Al-Anon that I could take that word that said the alcoholic in my life, and I could change that word to asshole, and that worked for me because not everybody is an alcoholic. And I like your TSSR work because when you're in Al-Anon, you have to say that your qualifier, your alcoholic, or there's just that, that little thing that irritates me that says, well, you have to have an alcoholic that makes you mad to be in this program. Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
No, you don't. You just have to have an asshole, you know? And then they want you to say, well, maybe their grandfather was an alcoholic. Or,
Yeah, we're going to track them down someplace in your lineage.
In order to make you qualify, it's almost it's like, you guys have got to be, you're spending way too much time on this qualification. Why don't we just keep going through the steps? I love the work you're doing, kiddo. I think you're doing the right work.
It really feels right.
And
it feels like on the path.
I think you're on the path. I remember getting into the first thing I did AA and going through the steps and being on that pink cloud for a year, and I'm saying, I don't understand why the church didn't teach me. I was madder than heck at the church for not teaching me this stuff, right? Going through the literature, you find out that the genesis of AA actually came from the Oxford group, which was a Catholicism group, and they, kicked Bob out because he didn't want to believe in God or something. So Bill and Bob went off and created their own steps based on the Oxford group. I think they added about 3 or 4. So some of those steps have a genesis in some Christian religion.
Sure.
And if you go back and do the research on that, as I recall, then they got tired of not having anybody join because they had to be Christian, so they went to the second. So I don't even think they're Christian anymore. If you go back, they're still around, by the way.
Oh yeah.
I haven't really studied much, but I just have that curious mind, and I love Google. You can find out anything, right? But anyway, so the evolution of the program and where you're taking it is very exciting to me, because you are doing, in my opinion, what we're all supposed to be doing.
That's what it feels like, yeah.
We're all supposed to be trying to get better and help other people get better.
Yep.
And I am amazed, and I don't understand the connection that we had. I just know that it was there when you walked in the door. And I don't know what we're supposed to be doing 10, 15 years from now. I just know we're supposed to keep doing what we're doing right now in some fashion. And that's the reason I wanted to come on. I wanted to come on because I want people to say, this kid's doing the right thing. Now, you have to talk for a while because I'm going to cry.
Yeah. Well,
I got to just calm down a minute.
Yeah, you fogged me up too, I don't know what happened either in that whole thing with that connection deal, and there's a few of us, and you just felt it, and I don't know how to put that in words or how that happens. And, what my mind wants to tell me is I'm leaving people out when I say that about you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But on that TSSR front, I don't know how that happened either. I landed with a sponsor that had 30-something years of sobriety and picked me basically when I poured out my guts one day, and he walked up and he was telling me about this book he was writing, and I could give a shit about the book he was writing. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to know what my next thing was in the steps, because I was getting real tired of wearing this ankle bracelet, and I certainly didn't want to go to jail, and I knew if I drank or doped I was going to go to jail. Mm-hmm. And he gave me a copy of the first chapters of that book, and I started reading it and started realizing, because also while he was taking me through that blue book, he was telling me to do things that weren't in there, just like you said, the 90 and 90 and things like this. If it wasn't that, but he was having me do like exercise work on paper and things that wasn't in here. And I want to call him out, but I don't think I could do that. I didn't have the guts to do that. I was just doing what he said to do. And I frankly knew that I had been handed a gift when he came and offered to sponsor me too. And I didn't want to mess that up. I really, really did not want to mess that up.
Exactly.
So, if he'd have told, I've said this joke before, if he told me to pick a booger and put it on page 263, it would be in there the next time he saw me. I just did what he told me to do. But as I started reading these chapters, I started seeing this stuff written down that was a little bit deeper dive into this work. And as the time went by, I started realizing, I say I don't know what happened in 2015, but the right teacher hit the right student at the right time, and God put us together, and so I know what happened. That is not lost on me one bit. I don't know how it happened. There's still that mystery behind it. But to then started to get to that opportunity. I read that book a few times. I was supposed to keep it on the down low because he didn't. Other people wanted to read it too, but he was allowing me this little 1 year. I wasn't even a year sober. I'm not sure. He was letting me read it, and I felt privileged.
Oh yeah,
because there was a lot of people wanting to read it, and he was telling me, shh. And I started getting the guts up to start writing in it, and going, this don't sound right, that don't sound right, and a couple of those kind of things, and went through it a few times, and then fast forward as it evolved. I think I read it 3 times in manila folders, and I have right now the last set, because I would give him a manila folder, and he'd give me the next chapter. I never had more than like a chapter at a time on me. And the last time through, I asked him if I could start keeping it. And he was a little taken aback at first, like, why? And I just straight up told him 2 reasons. Because someday I think this is going to be important to have for history. And 2, it ain't in book form yet, and I need something to refer to as I'm helping people.
You want to start using it already?
Yeah, I wanted to have it because my copy that's under my dresser in there has got tabs and stuff in it where I was keeping track of, just like I do in my big book, of where things are at in there and notes and things like that. And we started up the meetings, and I had that in the back of my head. I didn't know if that was going to work because I did have this thing because I had to be pretty desperate. You know what I mean? But I hear your story, right? And you really didn't have any consequences laying on you. I mean, you weren't going to prison, or you weren't getting ready to get divorced, or you weren't getting ready to lose your kids, or any of these kind of things that a lot of us come in with. And I was getting ready to go to prison, and I wondered if you didn't have that sense of desperation, would you do this work still? And I'm finding out they don't quite do it at the pace that maybe I would like to. And like my AA sponsees are in a hurry. They're the ones like you. I had to whoa them. I had to prod the TSSR folks a little bit because they have lives and stuff. It's just not that bad for them, you know. But I have 3 current sponsees in there, and another one that's basically through. He actually come to me through AA, but he's not an alcoholic. He got in some trouble with his employer, and they sent him to AA, and he ran into me, but he's not one. But if you get in trouble drinking, that's where you get labeled with, right? And I guess I've told it before, but I watched it work in his life the same way, and that was the same thing that happened to me when I first started sponsoring guys in this program. Is that when I thought I was so special that I knew it would work for me, I didn't really, you know what I mean? But in some regard, when it did work, I thought, well, that's just me. It wasn't that solid of a thing, but I did have some kind of feeling like that, and I certainly didn't think I could give it away. And then I started having some success with taking people through the same work that I was taking through, and it's not me. I mean, I'm just delivering the messages it's delivering to me. I'm no more than a mailman in that regard. I'm taking it from here and carrying it over to there and watching it happen, and then I started working with these TSSR people, and I'm watching it happen with them too. And I have 2 female sponsees. We say in there, I said, there are no rules, and we're going to break them all. Because, we're not traditionally going to sponsor cross-gender things. Fact of the matter is, we need to right now because the guys who have the tools in their pockets are men. And there's women coming in the door wanting help. So, I'm in a spot today, and I talked to my sponsor about it, and he lets, I have 3 elements I'm responsible to. My higher power, my sponsor, my close support group. Those people say I'm checked in. I'm checked in. Then I can move forward with some level of trust in the universe that I'm on the path. So sponsoring the women is something certainly new, but it works too. And it's not. And I don't plan to keep having to do that. What my hope is that we get some gals in the TSSR movement. That have the tools, and then they can carry that forward. But here for a little bit, specifically Christopher and I are both have some females that we're taking through the work. One was come through you, basically. One of my sponsees came through you, through a gal who was married to this guy, and he bopped in and asked me to start working with him. And another one of the joys in my life. I don't guess they will matter when we say first names. It won't make any difference. Tim and Charlene, and Tim's a daily caller, and I giggle at him every day because I always like in the beginning you say call me, and I'm guilty of not answering my phone all the time either. Can't.
No, I can't.
But I tell these people talk to me talk to my voicemail like I answered. Give me the lowdown on the day. Tell me what happened, and I will listen to it. I promise you, I will get to it and I'll listen to it. And if there's something you need. And we have some codes, I'll have one of my sponsor brought to me. If somebody texts me 911 right now, I would have to put this podcast on pause for a minute and go see what this person needs because if something is up. So you get these guys and they leave you these 15-second voicemails. Hey, this is Bob. Just checking in. Give me a call when you can. Click. No, that don't work. And so now, Tim cannot get through on one voicemail. Do you know what the voicemail limit is time-wise? 4 minutes. I do know.
Is that on the phone?
Yeah.
That was programmed into everybody's phone?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's on everybody's, but I do know these iPhones. And my sponsor has an Android, and we both kid around because I watch that 4-minute mark hit because we leave each other regularly 4-minute voicemails also. Okay. 4-minute voicemail is a long time to listen to.
I bet it is.
And when they had to, then the second call comes through, and I got the rest of the message on a second voicemail, and I love it. It just tickles me because I watch a guy who was barely able to talk to me and converse with me at some level, didn't trust me enough to do that, and didn't trust the world, frankly, enough to do that. To start having the same thing happens when we come into the room, the traditional 12-step rooms. They come in, they're blocked up, can't share, don't want to let anybody in, but trust builds. And it begins to become a safe environment for them, and they can see other people sharing and being vulnerable, and they're not getting stabbed, and they come around, and the next thing you know, and you watch these human beings bloom, is what you do.
It's
what I get to do is watch them bloom, whether if it's in whatever 12-step group I happen to be with my foot in, which is primarily Alcoholics Anonymous and TSSR, watching that happen, and it's just. I do everything else in my life in order to do this.
There's nothing like it, and you alluded early on when you were kind of introducing me about the smile that we would have on our face, and I got to tell you, because I have 4 little brothers, and somehow you grouped into that category the first day I met you, and so when you would not be around for a while, we do worry, because we make a connection. For whatever reason, God connects us to the people that he wants you to be connected to. And you wouldn't come around, or I could tell you were really in a dark place when you were there. Because I could tell I could tell.
I know what you mean now. I mean, and looking back, I know people knew, I thought I was pulling a wool over her then, but now where I sit, when I look across the room, I know the same thing. I've been given that sixth sense where you can frankly pick up. I can read people's energy today.
Yeah.
No matter if they're in a room or at the grocery store or at the library or at the ball game. You usually can take people's temperatures pretty well.
You can. If you stay in the sunlight of the Spirit yourself, and you have to do the work to do that. And sometimes I can let myself to get too busy with other things. Although, I had a come to Jesus meeting, for lack of better words, with myself when it became apparent that I don't need to work anymore. But I think I'm in a place where God wants me to be there too. I do help a lot of people. I lead a lot of people to 12-step recovery, because in the job that I do, it becomes pretty apparent when one of my folks that I work with in the planning process spend more money than they should on their kids.
Yeah.
And so it becomes apparent to me that might be the issue. And so when I really had to do a lot of soul searching and prayers at some point, I came to the conclusion that I'm supposed to keep the job that I've got because God wants me in that seat. Because I was given a gift of doing what I do, and I have people that desperately need me to connect them to this program.
Well, there's a service aspect to your occupation anywhere where you are, when you are working with your people, you're helping them. Something I found in this recent job change of coming into this self-employed thing is a complete different shift, where I was like in a cog in the wheel of corporate American, and at some level, I could tell myself I was helped, but we were just making things, man. We were in the industry. Today, I feel a lot more settled because I actually get to go. It just fits my my path, my flow, where I'm at today. My trajectory is to help people. And even though I put a little money in my pocket, helping people. Nobody says that's a bad thing at all. I would think that I had a little of that in my head. If you weren't really helping, if you were making money doing it.
I did have that guilt thing about making money.
Yeah.
It's
weird. Money's got some weird flavor to it if you allow it.
It does. My mother is a very spiritual person, and she would say she was, just being Catholic, but she's not just Catholic. My mother's got whatever it is, this gift is that we aspire to have. She's always had that. My friends always said, "I swear your mom's got a halo around her," and most people that meet her kind of know that to be true. But she set me straight on that. She said, Becky, you can't help anybody if you don't have money. She said, maybe God's giving it to you, so you know who to give it to. So she helped me with that, and I'm very blessed. So I get to help when I feel the need is there. I get to help, and that makes me happy too. But
it's got the double aspect to it, you know. I mean, on a daily basis, even when those people don't need our brand to help, you're still helping them. You are helping them. They are better off after meeting you than they were before.
But I have to tell you something else that'll resonate with you because of the work you're doing. Because I remember early on in working, maybe the first year or so, working with my sponsor, and we got in an argument about something. And she said, your primary purpose is to stay sober and help another alcoholic. I said, excuse me, my primary purpose is to stay sober and help and serve God. I remember that very distinctly, that my primary purpose is not just to help another alcoholic. It's to help whoever he puts in front of me today.
Yeah.
And I've always believed that. And so I'm one of those, rule followers, but I certainly still have my own opinions about where you're going and what I think you're doing is the right thing to do.
Yeah, it says in that book there, it actually says to be a maximum service to God and our fellows, right?
Yeah. And
it doesn't say alcoholics in that particular spot. And I'd change that. I'd just say, I do have a primary purpose, and it is to stay sober, but it's to help anybody recover from whatever God wants me to help them with. I'm finding this thing's working for people who just really don't have it. It's weird. Some people's got some real, and I like getting to that because I like wrapping some powerless and some step one around something. I like, what is the thing that's eating you? Because that's, we know what's eating the alcoholic at first. Of course, we know that's really just a symptom of it. We got to get down deeper later. But in this TSSR, you got to get something tangible. Whether if it's, and even, if it's overspending, if it's rage, if it's self-confidence, if it's, different kind of things, and I let them build it. It's not for me to. I just say, hey, what is it? You know what it is. Sit down and think about it. You know what's bothering you.
I love it.
You will sit on the foot of your bed for a little bit and think about the things that you're doing you shouldn't be doing, or the things you should be doing that you're not. Those things will come to you if you sit there and give it some thought. God will give you the answers to that.
They do. He does. Your friend that you introduced me to when we were trying to do the yoga thing, and when she introduced me to that concept of no recreational sugar.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, that'll work for me. So far I've made it 8.5 months at one point.
Yeah.
At one point, and now I got re-addicted to sugar, and that's an interesting thing for me too, because I just love candy.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing too when you talk about throwing that same thing into these different. I've been pondering that lately about what is like. In TSSR, do certain people maybe want to like choose an abstinence and know what it is when they break it? That's something that Renee had taught me, and that was the thing, from the OA side of things, of what is your abstinence, what is your red light, and she used green light, red light, yellow, or green light, yellow light, red light, and what is the yellow light items, and and so, man, and this gets really sticky because I go,
it does,
because I can't drink or drug, and I know that I can't. But that doesn't mean your abstinence has to be a red light, straight up item.
Right.
You know what I mean? We don't have to do, just because I'm doing that with mine, and the book says, we found no other way to do it except for with 100% abstinence. And that's pretty much proven for people like me and you in that regard. But there's some latitude when we're talking about the way these spiritual malady is manifesting in you. Because the other thing I don't want my people to do is go to, having a cupcake and now we're going to beat ourselves up. We've been doing that long enough.
That's why I wanted to come on. I wanted to come on because I realize there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this area. And it's, one day at a time without recreational sugar works for me, but I don't want to beat myself up when I decided I'm going to eat that cupcake. And that's why I wanted to be here today. I wanted us to talk about these other things.
Yeah. It excites me. Guess what?
It excites me too, because you've had plenty of really good speakers about the AA program, and we all know that for our walk, it's a very important part of our walk. but moving it to the next level of how, obviously somebody that is severely diabetic has a much bigger issue with eating that cupcake than I do.
Right.
Right. And, I tell myself at age 64 that it's okay to have that cupcake, and I'm never going to look like I was when I was 35 again anyway, so what the hell, right? And they make stretchy clothes for people like me, so why do I worry about the cupcake? But I do know there is a health issue, and I do want to be around for my grandkids when they graduate from college, and, that kind of thing is there, but, you have to worry about what message you send when somebody has to come back and get a new white chip for their ism. And so maybe just saying, okay, well, do you want to do a different one this time? Might try a different one this time. How about giving up cussing? That'd be a hard one for me.
Yeah,
right?
me too.
There's all kinds of things we could play around with to make it fun and keep people from falling in that depths of, I just can't do it, or I'm not good enough, or because that is what we do. We will
beat ourselves up.
We
long
will beat
enough
ourselves
and,
up.
I mean, there's just no value in that. Zero. It just doesn't. You talk about you want to go worst case kind of stuff. I mean, there's folks who relapse that don't come back to AA because they cannot come back and get that white chip. So they stay out because that's too much. And I don't know the answer to that at all. I'm not going to propose that that's be done away with. That don't read me wrong out there, audience, that I'm thinking anything like that. But I do see the reality of it. And at TSSR, and I don't know how this stuff happens. I really don't. These little, however, I started making them little number ones. And, this one is for somebody whose sobriety date is the 14th of this month. And it'll be their 1 year sobriety date. And also a TSSR member. And I started, we didn't have TSSR chips. Yeah. And I started cutting these little pieces of wood and carving in them, and we don't give them away for how long you've been sober. But, once in a while somebody comes in a meeting and they say 6 months, and this person has been 6 months sober, and they get up and they get one of them chips. And I really don't care why they take one of them chips. Take one.
Yeah. I want to celebrate my
success. And some people do it just
today.
because they've been hanging around for that long.
I did say, I'm in that... on a Facebook page for the Friends of Bill and Bob, and the other one for the Al-Anon folks. And I did hear somebody say, I wonder why we in Al-Anon don't get chips, right? Because they don't get to celebrate success. And I did notice that, because I'd still go to Al-Anon sometimes, and I even have an Al-Anon sponsor too, right? And she was very valuable to me when I had my house fire in 2016. And, I thought, I'm going to go through the Al-Anon steps during this house fire so I can stay sane. And she was really good for me, and she's a really good friend of mine today too. So I love all the programs. I even participated some in that, what do they call that at church? Celebrate Recovery. And I think they might, they have that, as I recall, their whole concern is not having people beat themselves up for their transgressions when they happen, and so that's the good part of that program, is that there and there's no any particular ism that you have to have, but they don't really. It just didn't work for me. I don't. First of all, nobody would ever say Becky's a church lady, and so I just didn't feel like that was where God. I tried it because I was wondering where God was leading me next. Right, I really wanted to know where God was leading me, and because I felt like there was something missing, and so I tried that, wondering if that's what I was supposed to be doing, because I was invited by the church to help out with that program, but it just didn't. It just wasn't what I wanted. Or what I felt. I didn't feel like I was being effective there. You know how that is. Yeah. So, but I think what you're doing is important, and I've been to that one meeting that you had over there, and quite frankly, I would love to go more regularly, but the meeting times don't work in my schedule, and also that location is kind of scary for me to go to by myself. You did move from that Unity Church?
Yep, we are. We're out on Dutchman's Lane area.
In the
we're at the Brook Hospital now. We're actually meeting at the Brook Hospital, on Browns Lane. It's Dutchman's and Brown, same time, 7:30 on Thursday nights.
Really?
You know what I mean? The Brook is. It used to be Tim Brook and used to be all that, but we're using their facilities. I want to make clear that it's not affiliated with that. It's just like AA and everything else. We're just using they've opened their facilities to us, and because they want to somewhat promote this 12-step program, you know, because somebody posted something today on, and I didn't have a chance to look at it. I was kind of busy about the effectiveness of Alcoholics Anonymous in some New York Times magazine. And I think it's new because the guy who posted it wouldn't be putting, you know, sometimes you see something, it'll be a 2011 article or something, you know.
Right.
And of course you can also find all you want to on why it won't work or why it doesn't work or the fallacy around it or whatever, but this will look to be, and I'm going to go back and take a look at it on these 12-step things. And, you know, I know I beat this up like crazy, but I can take this 12-step book here, this AA book in my hand, and what it feels like at some level is that in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, since I've been coming in, we've been going, everybody needs this. I wish my aunt had it. I wish everybody was working the program. And then we stick the book behind her back. You know, what anybody doing? Yeah, everybody. Yeah, we all agree that these tools are valuable for anybody who will want to employ them in their lives. I mean, it's like anything else. If you want Celebrate Recovery to work for you, I think it will. And we're fortunate to have a lot of different things. You know, I watch people come into the yoga teacher training with the same kind of thing, and I realized that whole yogic lifestyle was more than just what I was doing on a mat. There's actually a philosophy and operating system on how to work your life inside of that. That is somewhat parallel to what we do. You know, and it's got little side steps and alleys and different things. And the one thing I don't see anywhere else are these concrete tools like 4 and 5. And this, you know, 8, 9, you know, these things where we actually are doing, you know, I don't see that in a lot of other places where it's like, sit down, do this. That good orderly direction part of God. I don't see that any place except for in 12 steps, even churches and things like that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying I don't see it. I'm not going to sit here and profess to be the authority on that. Another thing you said a minute ago, and it caught me, dang, it left me. It got away.
Don't you just hate that?
Yeah. It's like when we prayed for it at the beginning of this, you know, some people will end this podcast and they'll go, oh, I forgot to say.
Yeah.
I said, don't you remember we said a prayer at the beginning of this podcast for God to help us say what we're going to say. And if it didn't make it, there's a reason it didn't make it. There's a reason.
That's exactly why we said that prayer. We want to be sure what we said is what we're supposed to say for somebody to learn something. And maybe I said something I shouldn't have said, but I was supposed to say it.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, I know one of the other things I was saying, you talk about them smiles and that, you know, that was the other thing that really hits me, because I can still picture the very first AA meeting. I know exactly. I could go stand in the spot today my chair was at, and I could at some level, I can tell you where the chairperson's table was sitting in the direction, because it's moved all over that room, right, over the years. I can probably point to where a number of people who have been influential in my recovery and over these years were sitting in that room. And I can do the same thing for the first time I walked into a Spiritual Underground meeting too. I can still remember it was that impactful on me that I can remember where certain people were in a spatial relation to where I was sitting, and I could take you right back to the spot where I was sitting that day. But the one other thing that caught me was your smile, Joe, you know, him kidding around with me. I wasn't real happy about being, you know, because I was like feeling like it felt. That's the other thing, and I've heard this, stole this from a speaker. When I first came, it felt like punishment. When I first came to AA, it felt like I was, you know, this was like a punishment. This was like a gauntlet kind of thing. You know, I was going to shame myself and walk in here, you know. You know, that's the opposite of what it is. And when I sat down and I saw these smiling faces and these people that looked like normal people, and sharing, you know, because that night was magic. For me, I walked in, had no idea what I'm doing, nothing. I mean, I'm looking for the application. I really mean it. When I called Joe to ask if I should be a little early, man, I thought maybe there'd be some paperwork I had to fill out or something. I'm not kidding. Like, you know, the doctor's office, first time you go to the new doctor, you know, they want you there 20 minutes or so early so you can fill out the paperwork. And Joe said, nah, man, just show up. And I got there and he kidded me, you know, when I got there. You know how Joe, he's a wonderful, fun-loving dude, you know. Wonderful man. No harm, but I wasn't real happy about it because I'm like, I'm not too fond of coming in here and getting teased. And I did that deal where they said, is anybody... They said, is this anybody's first AA meeting? And I, okay, just like you at some level, you know, I was this real breaker in one Jekyll and Hyde thing, but also this real follower on the other hand, you know. So when he says, anybody here for the first time, I put my hand up. And what I know today that pause after that is meant for in case somebody else is a little slow to raise their hand. We just give that little pause and give some people a minute if they feel like it. That dead air bothered me, and I shared a little bit, and told you all that I was 3 days sober, and and I did the best I could to say why I was sitting here after never hearing anybody share an AA meeting ever. So I wasn't modeling. I didn't come and hear what people were saying and going, okay, I kind of get what you say. And the meeting turned around, and this whole group of people turned around and dumped their experience, strength, and hope on me. And I don't think there was a share that happened that night was not in offering of that. And man, it just jacked my soul up. I walked out of there with my 25 pounds lighter that night. Now, it didn't stick. With a
bag of hope.
I did. I walked out with a big bucket of hope and a whole bunch of phone numbers. And they said, call them. And I walked out of there, and I went to another meeting the next night that didn't have near the amount of juice, as I would say today. Didn't have near the amount of juice in it. Matter of fact, there's a guy I see around, and it was a speaker meeting, and it probably wasn't his fault. I kind of kid about it. But I think on that second night, after my second AA meeting, I don't think I've ever had another piece in my life where I wanted to drink so bad. I walked out of the speaker meeting, and I sat down in my car, and I remember actually physically trembling, scared, and I had them pamphlets sitting there next to me in the front seat of the car still that were given to me the night before. I grabbed them up and left when I took them with me, and I remember Jerry, and I don't know why that one hit me. He seemed safe to me. He felt safe. Some of the other people, I wasn't quite sure about whether that other thing we say where I'm simultaneously superior to you and less than you at the same time.
Oh, I've not heard that.
Yeah.
I've not heard that. Just that egomaniac with an inferiority complex.
Yep, same thing, same concept.
Yeah, that's
And so I called him and Jerry and Happy and Mike and Big Rick. We're all sitting up at the McDonald's up in Georgetown. And I was downtown New Albany at the carriage house, parked outside of there. And it's like, I don't know, it's a little after 9 or whatever.
Yeah, it's the Thursday night meeting. Yeah. They'd all been to that Thursday night in Edwardsville.
Right, yep.
Yep.
And they said, come on up. And I thought, that's a long way to drive.
It's right there off the exit, right?
Yeah. But I did. I drove up there, man. Those guys sit around at a table with me until like 2 o'clock in the morning that night. I thought, dang, these guys stay up late. And they kept on doing it too, And night after night after night, we're staying up. But, after I got some, and I did pretty decent. I got some traction out of the gates and did pretty well for a while. But like after I started getting a little bit better, I realized those guys' bedtime started getting earlier. And what I know today is they were sitting up there for me to help this new kid guy. I felt like a kid. I was 40-something years old, but I felt like I was 12. And as far as in this program, I certainly was a kid. And today I know what those guys were doing. They were sitting up there helping this new kid
they were the old
stay sober tonight.
I can tell you, Happy was really, really instrumental in my early sobriety because everything that came out of his mouth, I really grasped, understood, felt, believed. And it was a long time before I realized the guy that in that Saturday morning meeting that always said stuff that I really felt and believed and felt like he had a lot of wisdom. I didn't know that was his dad until after he passed.
Yeah, I never knew his dad. I didn't have a chance.
Man. And always said something that was very powerful. And that's my favorite meeting of all time. Anywhere in the country that I've ever been, that Saturday morning meeting. They call it the Hoosier Hilltoppers.
Yeah.
It's my absolute favorite meeting. There's a lot of long-term sobriety in that meeting.
Right.
And they lean more towards, healthy conversation and making people. It just feels like they want everybody to become better people it's closed discussion.
It's closed?
It's closed discussion, and it seemed like there's a lot of real long-term sobriety in that meeting. And so that is my favorite all-time ever, any meeting, anywhere I ever go. And I have found a Saturday morning home group up in Plymouth, Michigan, when I'm up in that part of the country. It has a lot of good they do it different up there.
Do they?
They do different tables. The big one, it's a great big meeting, a lot of people in there, but they have the readings are all, community readings, and they give out the tokens. And then when you go into the discussion, each table has its own discussion.
Or like a small groups, almost busting up.
So the benefit of that for me is going there as long as I've been going, because I've been going there about as long as I've been sober. I know now who has that, what the wisdom and the sobriety that I need to hear, and I know who they are, and they'll be sitting at different tables, so I can walk in the door and I can say, okay, I think I would need to sit at this person's table this week. And always, and then I like that too, because everybody has to say something, and they could pass if they want to, but they kind of go around the table and invite everybody to say something.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's good, because when you're in some of these open discussion meetings where you wait till somebody raises their hand, sometimes you get the same people, and I've noticed in a round robin, they've done it a couple times in the Al-Anon meeting that I liked, and somebody did it recently at a meeting I normally go to that they don't usually do that in, but where it wasn't necessarily the person asking to speak, it was their turn. And what I've noticed is there's people that come to some of these meetings that might be somewhat introverted, but they open their mouth and talk because it's their turn, not because they raise their hand, and they say some really good stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like going to that meeting up there, because if you sit at the table, there's people you don't know, and they'll say stuff that you need to hear.
Yeah.
Because they don't have to, but
I get it. Yeah, you can always pass.
You can always pass.
But most people want to share. Even these introverts and stuff, man. There's that. They're not sitting. This whole, that Johann Hari says something of that. Addiction, opposite addiction is connection. A whole big piece of this is this connection we're building with one another. I mean, that is the steps. I don't doubt the magic of them, but like you said, and that's something else that I could with bell ring, but you were kind of on a roll, and I don't want to necessarily is that you did that by yourself, and I would almost say that it can't be done by itself. That is divinely inspired, where it requires a teacher, student, mentor, apprentice thing to guide you through that work, and that forces you and I to have a connection, at least at some level, so that we can do that thing together.
So we can do it together. That's the juice.
Yeah, it is. And that's what I do with everybody that I work with today, because it was modeled for me by my sponsor. And I tell them out of the gates too, look, and it's part of I have people, I do an informal pact with them. I'm going to put a lot of energy into helping you do this, man. And I mean it. And it is in my heart. And do not doubt for a minute that this is not, if you ever get the feeling that this is not important to me, erase it, because it's not. It is important to me. There's nothing more important to me than to give this 12-step message to the people that God puts in front of me. And you are sitting there.
You're there.
And
I'm it.
And I have them, but I say, hey, the flip side of this is that you got to stay with me. Because I don't want to lose you on 8 or 6 or do a 4-step. And I even warrant, I do believe that I think there's very few things that is worse than doing a 4-step and not doing 5. I tell people, don't do 4. If you're not going to stay with me, don't do that, because that's picking all them wounds and not getting the resolution of it on the end.
Yeah.
So that's part of my 3rd step decision is, look, when you do 4, you got to stick with me and do the rest of this stuff. And I said, and what I'm looking for is I'm looking for another soldier on my team.
I heard you mention that.
I want another partner in this life thing. And that's what I'm doing. That is why I'm spending the energy to build a new relationship with a new person, so that we can march down this thing called life together.
Yeah, because that's the what do they call it? Who says it in the program? And that's the jelly roll.
Jelly in the donut or something
somebody
like
says
that.
And that's the jelly roll. That's one of those old timers on Saturday morning. I don't even think he's around anymore, but I think that was somebody there just said, that's the jelly roll.
So what back to that thing is that encouraging these people who don't normally want to speak does some, again, and I don't want to overanalyze, but I do tend to find, I like looking and go, there's an element right there about why this works. And I also listen to people like Jordan Peterson, who will talk some things and plug that in. But, getting this person to engage in this meeting is good for them. The other little dynamic that happens is when they share, then they open themselves up for other people to be able to come and approach them. Because the quiet guy in the back, nobody really wants to go talk to.
Right. Right,
But
and
when
then
he's
they
like
still
kind
feel
of
isolated.
right, so then it's a vicious cycle that direction. And if you can get that person to share, like in what you're talking about in those little groups, and I am not a fan of the stick the cotton in your, take the cotton out of your ears and stick it in your mouth stuff. I think people ought to come in meetings and talk and share. And open up and let's get this thing out. Mankind, this Mankind Project thing I've been doing talks about, when we do the work in that, we actually do some some ritual kind of stuff, like smudge in, and we do some stuff to build this safe and tight container so that everybody in the group feels safe to be vulnerable or to share the things they need to share. And that's another kind of concept we're trying to bring into the TSSR world specifically, and it's something that's been modeled in my AA home group, is that this is a safe place. Share anything you need to share on tonight. We don't care what it is. Because when you're down the road like your deal, or both of us, alcohol is not really my problem anymore. My thinking and my living, and that is what I need to share on. So if I limit everything I share to the topic is concerned with alcoholism, I get the point with the statement. But it doesn't mean that everything I share about has to be revolved around drinking. I got life issues today that I need to talk about.
I think everything I need to share about is fear, because that is the crux of my problem.
Yeah.
And I can share my experience. I think age has a lot to do with it. You live enough life that you do find that God did bail you out. And you've met my little brother. I got two little brothers in the program. Both of them going to be sober 10 years this year.
Wow, very cool.
Tony's this month and Pat's in May. But Tony is notorious for saying he'll be all right. You'll be all right. And I shared this in a meeting that day. Your brother was in there. And I said, I was worried about, trying to find another home group, because my home group's not the same as it used to be. And I'm still coming to Saturday morning. And I'm all worried about what I'm going to do about the home group. And I'm real busy. And I got to find one that works in my program. And I get in my car. And the Spiritual Underground podcast starts blaring out of my radio. I didn't even turn it on. If that's not a God thing, I don't know what is. And I thought, well, heck, here's my meeting right here in the car, going back and forth to work. And then you reach out to me on Sunday and say, you want to come over and talk? And if that's not a God thing, I don't know what is, right?
Yeah.
That was the most bizarre spiritual experience I ever had. He said, here's your meeting right here in your car. Listen to the podcast while you're going to and from work. That's an hour a day.
Yeah.
Driving to and from work. Thank you. So I get to go to meeting every day when I go to work, and then on Saturdays.
Well,
so that works for me, and I'm just amazed. And so I can look back now on my 64 years, and I can look at every place in my life where God has been there. And so when Tony says it's going to be all right, I believe that today. But when the other people in my life would say it's going to be all right, in the past, I'd have to say, well, now, I need to know how that's going to be, right? Because if you're married to somebody and you're worried about your bills getting paid, and that somebody doesn't have a job, and all they say is it's going to be all right, that didn't work for me, right? I mean, I have to have a plan. And so I realize now that I can formulate my options. What are all my options? And the man that I'm involved with is the one that taught me this by watching him raise his sons. And so he would say, okay, what are your options? That's all he would ever say, is what are your options? He wouldn't say, here's what you should do. He'd say, what are your options? Listen to him, talking to him on the phone. What are your options? So now I know when I am working on a situation that I need to do something about, I can figure out what my options are. And then I can pray for guidance to choose the right option. And I now trust that no matter what option I choose, it was the one I was supposed to choose, because if it doesn't work out very well, I'm supposed to learn something from that.
Yeah.
And I now know that today. So my fear level is greatly reduced because I know God's got that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that before. And as I grew in my alcoholic behavior, it was because my fear continued to increase. Zig, one of those positive thinking guys used to say opportunity knocked, and I didn't hear it because I had TV on. And I'd say opportunity or the answers. I would pray and ask God for the answers, then I'd get drunk and I wouldn't hear them. That's what I would do. And I didn't realize that meditation, which is step 11 for us, was the key for me to meditate.
Listen.
During the meditation, the options are revealed. Then during further meditation, the choice of the option gets revealed.
Yep.
And then after the results of the option, the lesson got revealed.
Yeah.
And then you just do the same, same thing. You rinse and repeat or whatever. You just do every time now. You can do that, and it is such an exciting message to share. That if you just trust your higher power and do the work and not forget how to do the work, and the only way not to forget how to do the work is continue to go to 12-step meetings.
Yep.
Right? That's how you not forget,
Yep.
or how you get reminded, or you have people that give you a little bit different way to look at an option, because we're all in this together. I had one young lady that God put in my life early on. I was probably in my late 20s at the time I met this person. She's a year or two younger than me, and she said, I firmly believe that we go through life with one hand reaching up and one hand reaching down. She said two things that were really important to me. So you got to go through, life, one's reaching up, so you got to reach to the people that you have to learn from, and you got to reach down and pull the people along that have to learn from you when we go through life like this. And she was also studying Buddhism at the time, and she said, now, they believe that we keep coming back till we get it right.
Right.
So she said, so you take the man that you're married to. That was that good guy that I talked to you about. Very, very level, even keel emotionally. Stoic, probably because of his family background. But anyway, he seemed level-headed and even keeled. And she said, you take this man you're married to. He's been here a few more times than we have. She said, I can tell you've been here a time or two more than I have. But our friend Sharon, she ain't never been here before. And so that resonated with me, because there are people that seem to have more enlightenment that I've met in my travels than others.
Yeah, I subscribe to a certain amount of that. Again, I would not ever begin to say that I would know, but I believe there's something to do with these old souls and new souls and this that sort of thing, because some people just seem to get it a little more than others, and you see some, and that just can't seem to, needs another trip through.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is a very interesting. Yep, it really is an interesting thing to think about.
I can think too much if I let myself.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I can slow down and ask. I think until I begin to cause damage, or I begin to smoke my ears, or begin to proper use of the will kind of stuff, I give it a brain to think with.
I think that is true for folks like you and I, but we had a little bit of discussion about it before we started this thing about getting crossing the line, maybe doing something we shouldn't do, and right now the words we choose sometimes are not words we think should be taken in the wrong way, but they get taken
sometimes,
that way. And
this is at the moment in this world right now. People seem to be looking for you to say the wrong thing.
And using that against
right,
you.
Yeah. Oh, there he said it.
Yeah, yeah. Ring, ring, HR. That's what my young assistant says.
Oh, yeah.
They
ring,
think I'm an
ring,
HR risk because I'm 64 and I'm liable to say something you can't say anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know you can't say. What do you mean you can't say that anymore? It's like, when did that change? So, it's anytime you open your mouth, you're subject to having somebody criticize what you say. And
I've got a lot of that. No sense in really being you saying something, and that is, you watch these evolutions of these meetings and these pods, and and I've heard about what's happened with the group that you and I met at, and and when I even got there in the beginning, it wasn't what it was, and it really got up to being something, but we always had like this foundational chunk of it, and I haven't, the TSSR started being, the night changed on from Wednesday night to Thursday night, and things change. I've seen that be really detrimental to a lot of meetings in the last few years of changing, even changing rooms and stuff seems to stir the spiritual energy up and change some things. And my home group is changing. There's some guys that have decided they're not finding what they want with us. And have went off to, and it's a point of contention kind of thing, and it couldn't, there's some goofy energy wrapped up around it. And last night was the first time, so, they, out of all the nights of the week, they decided to have their own meeting. They had it on the same time and same night, same time as ours, as the other one. What that did was cause a lot of people a lot of strife on which way to go, especially these people who were being sponsored by some of those guys want to stay here and want to go there, and they are not there, being left with having to make a decision on where to go. And it's gotten me to being real careful about what I say, because I'm afraid I'm going to say something wrong. And that has never been something I've been worried about since I've been here. I have always felt safe in AA to speak freely. There's a little bit of scuttlebutt about the drug stuff, about the singleness of purpose, but I never really experienced that personally. I've watched I've heard it, and I've seen some isolated incidents of take them aside, or somebody will share something. You talk about drugs in my meeting, and I'll tell you to go down the hallway. I'm like, well, that guy just did, and I didn't see you talk to him. And I've always just felt 100% safe sharing anything I needed to share in AA. That's the thought I lost. The thing about being hard to come back to AA and thinking that you're going to be beat up coming back after a relapse. And you were talking about the cupcakes and the not being that, and nobody ever beat me up. I never received anything. I might have got a little tough love once in a while coming back. About how long are you going to play with this? Big Rick said to me one day, he said, sit me down, and he said, look, I'm going to just share something with you, and I don't know why I feel compelled to share it, but he said, yeah, I don't know why I think this, but you're going to end up dead or in jail before you get this thing. And I had no idea how close he was to calling that right that day.
That was before it happened?
That was before. That was when I was still toying.
Yeah.
It was like, and Happy telling me he's the guy, and I have, my recollection is he pointed his finger in my face. He probably didn't really. He was probably more casual in that, but how sensitive us alcoholics can be.
Yeah. Especially
and he said, and I remember, and he was just kind of tired of hearing my little batting around about why I couldn't do this or do that, and he said, the thing is, Dan, here, you must participate in your own recovery. Oh. But now I say that all the time. Thank you for allowing me to participate in my recovery. Those guys helped me back then, and it might hurt my feelings a little bit.
Yeah, good guys.
Really good guys. Yeah, but that being shunned coming back is in is that's just on that's on each individual person, because I don't think that's. I mean, with this whole big giant pool of humans we got floating around, there's a lot of different things going on, but the majority of it's that negative bias. The one person that said something to me that hurt my feelings outweighs the 30 who were smiling when I walked in the room.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? Because that's what we focus on is the negative.
Yep.
That is what we focus on.
Yeah. The truth is, AA has always welcomed me back with the majority of smiles and glad to see you. And even when I'm trying to feed you my bullshit about why I wasn't been around for a while, you just smiled and loved on me anyway. And
just glad to see you.
Yeah,
I mean, because that's the truth. Just glad to see you, and that's the same. I feel that same way about all these young people that I see come in, and I get a little bit of connection with, and then I don't see them again.
Yeah,
it's like I thought I was going to have a new friend.
Yeah.
A new kindred spirit, so to speak. Like you were talking about, that group that you wanted to have with you going through this life together. When you meet somebody that just resonates with you from the beginning and they don't come back.
Yep.
There was a really, just a delightful young lady when I first walked in, that one of the 5 people a guy named Steve that I'm still friends with today, Shag, who's dead now, and Harlan, who's dead now, Big Jim, and a young lady, and I can't remember her name. Beautiful young lady with curly red hair, just, just delightful, because she had been sober for a while, and she had told where she had been sleeping on somebody's couch, and she was trying to get her kids back. And, I watched her go through. I don't know how long sober she was when I first walked into the rooms, but I watched her go through and get that first-year token and then get her kids back, and then she quit coming. And I haven't heard or seen from her since, and I don't know. And I hate that, because I want to believe she's in a good place.
Yeah.
And I really hate that, because I really liked that young lady. And
I had a friend called that back problems.
Yeah, and I
Start
don't know.
getting your stuff back. You start getting your stuff back, and
she might still
you're
be
okay.
sober.
Yeah.
Who am I
You
to
never
say
know,
she's
too.
not?
Yep.
I mean, I've met people that got sober without going to AA.
Yep.
So,
Or they come and got sober and didn't need to stay.
and didn't need to stay.
Yeah,
And,
my first 4 years of bumming around proved to me that I was probably going to have to stay.
I wanted to stay because I made some good friends, and
yeah.
I'm a social creature, right?
Yeah.
So I made some friends, and just
It
like
really
the first-
wasn't a didn't want to stay thing. It wasn't like I was repelled or anything, but I just thought I could that I could back way off and stuff. And, once I did try that, saying, okay, I'll really, I'll get a tourniquet on here and I'll do some big time stuff for a little bit. But then once I get that taken care of, then I can kick it into cruise control and go once in a while. And, once in a while turn into never. And a drink sounded good. And, and I'll be back in again and then rinse and repeat like you said earlier. And I realized that's probably, my experience has shown for this dude
that doesn't work.
that perimeter play probably is not going to work for me. It
No.
didn't work for 4 years, and I feel real fortunate that was only a 4-year period. The other thing is that that day that I walked in there on in 2011 was off of what was essentially a bad weekend. It was I'd had enough pills and liquor to last me a week of vacation, and I got home and I ran out of pills, and back then that wasn't cool. I needed both to be okay. And I didn't have a good weekend without that, and I hit a wall, and so ultimately that was a bad weekend. Everything was okay, really.
When you first got there.
When I come back in 2014, or late 2014, things had gotten a lot worse. I wasn't in that marriage that I had when I went on that vacation and had the bad weekend anymore. And yeah, things got a lot worse. So and I can share that with other people. Frankly, that seems to be a pattern. We've got some one chip wonders out there, but most of us have to do this little path walking thing where we wind and bob and weave until we finally end up whatever it is why it clicks at a certain time. Whether if it's consequences are raised up enough, or you hit the right people at the right time, or both. All that happens at the same time. I don't really sweat it anymore. I used to get a little bothered when people wouldn't do what I thought they should do. Because I know what you should do to get sober. I can tell you. But you just won't do it.
You just got to not drink, stay sober.
Yeah.
But
if you will
to get the juice.
Get this work and do this, man, you can have this.
If you want to be...
and you refuse to do it because you think there's some other way.
Yeah, you met the dry drunk. Well, there's one guy that, I can't remember how long he was sober. Got sober all on his own. You probably know him. I'm not going to say his name. But I think he was sober 3 years until he finally came to AA, because he was miserable. And I don't know who suggested he go to AA.
Yeah,
he's not that old. He's younger than you are, I think.
I have a really good friend. He was on the podcast. His name is Alex. He was sober 4 years or something, and had run into some Buddhist monk was helping him meditate and stuff. And stayed sober during that time, and somehow or another he landed in an AA meeting somehow or another and realized that was the whole thing the whole time. And
I think the important thing is having friends that are on the same path. And just like it was real easy for me not to drink Namwax, nobody we ran around with drank. And, I still needed something to relieve my fear and anxiety about things. But being a social person, just hanging around people, distracting my attention. I didn't need to drink as long as I was around people. I couldn't be by myself.
That's
because I was so
interesting.
full
Yeah.
of fear.
Yeah.
Couldn't be by myself. But it's easier not to drink when you hang around a bunch of people that don't drink.
Yeah.
And so unless you're in the middle of this program, if you come from a family background like mine, where every time you went to a funeral, the cooler beer was in the back car, and the
Completely normalized. Like, I mean, you and I were lots the same way. Well, the alcohol was not a daily thing around my stuff, but alcohol was normal. And Dad always had some in the refrigerator.
Well, once my mother married my stepfather, he drank a case of beer a day. And I was second oldest, 8 kids. Dad died at 18. So or when I was 19, 18, I can't remember now. But, all my little brothers grew up with somebody drinking a case of beer
Every day, yeah.
Not good guy, but drank a case of beer every day. So, their stories were much more involved with alcohol than mine were. He'd teach them how to be a man, but he also, part of that was drinking all the time. And so...
in fact, that's another one of these illusions, I mean, it doesn't necessarily make you bad, and you don't necessarily have, all in all, I wasn't that bad. I mean, I wasn't a bad dude. I was doing some bad things. But, like, all in all, it's a little bit of negative bias in a way, I mean, for most part, everything I was doing was all right, except for that breaking in houses part.
I love when our friend Joe says, don't tell anybody you're an alcoholic. The first thing they'll do is hide the silverware.
Yeah.
Because we can do some things we shouldn't do, and I did things I shouldn't have done when I was drinking. And
sure, I did.
Had most, wasn't illegal other than maybe driving sometimes when I shouldn't have been driving. But
that wasn't like doing a lot of. I mean, I wasn't a bad dude, and
I did the things that we ladies that are around a lot of men don't need to be doing, because being afraid is something that was eliminated if I was around a guy that I thought could beat somebody else up.
Yeah.
And when you're in a bar, you might need somebody like that by your
safety.
side, right? So I was a little bit more flirtatious than I should have been when I was married, and that's just something that's in most people's stories.
Yeah.
But if you're around the wrong people, they'll say you were a bad person. And if you're around the right people, they'll say you're just a fallible human being like the rest of us.
Yeah.
So I think that, I don't know what it says in the TSSR book. I need to buy one. But I was thinking about that. If you could just take all the literature and say, we fallible human beings. Because the realities are, if you have problems with somebody that's an asshole, he's just a fallible human being. Whether he's an alcoholic, it doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
We all have to understand that. And I think one of your stories, and I don't know if it was your sponsor that said it or something about, well, did you ever think your mother might have had a rough time growing up?
My sponsor's talking to Barry. It's in Barry's story.
Did you ever stop to think your mother might have had a rough time when she was growing up? Have you ever even stopped to think about that?
Yeah.
And I ran across a woman one time, and I got to spend a lot of time with her, and she had the most horrible childhood I ever could have imagined. And she was old enough at the time to talk about how horrible her dad's childhood was and how that had to make him the person that became horrible to her. She had done enough work that she was there when I met her. She was in another group of people that just walk a spiritual life. It's a totally different group than we do, but wonderful woman, and learned a lot from her about forgiveness.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I can't imagine going through some of the stuff I've heard, but I was very blessed.
Yeah, there's been some people lay some stuff on the other side of this podcast table that about had me fall, took me aback too, and most of us came from females. Of course, that'd be where my reaction would be the strongest, when I hear that some gal has been hurt in some way or what another, would hit me, and I think about that, watch them and see that forgiveness, and then they talk about it through this work of doing that. I'm really trying to get, this gender balance thing a little better in here, since I've wrangled all my men's group AA guys in here first. So I do like to hear that, and operating under that same principle of that, in the book will say, granting people this spiritual sickness thing rather than that they're just an asshole. And I get your point on that. That's not a rebuttal to that. But as I operate my day to day, it's better for me to just figure that something, like grant them that benefit of the doubt that just something is not right at the moment. They've no telling what they're dealing with, rather than to spend my spiritual energy being angry with them for whatever reason it is that they've got too many things in the checkout line or have cut me off. No matter what car was in my position on that time of day, where I was at on that road was getting cut off. It wasn't about me.
So
they did not cut me off.
Going back to that gender thing, one of the hardest lessons I had to learn is that, he ain't wrong, he's just different. And he being the operative word there. So I do a lot of work. This is before I ever got sober. I had to do a lot of work on the differences between men and women. And that's another thing you can't say today.
Just the differences?
No, you can't say that. But when this person, who happens to be female, is with that person who happens to be male, in the type of people that I associate with in those gender roles, they're different. And I did a lot of research on the differences and how we think and why we're hardwired to need the things we need, and they're different.
Yeah.
And understanding that and using that phrase in that song, "Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys," was where I got that. He ain't wrong, he's just different. And I use that a lot because working with people of your gender, until I learned that, I did think you were wrong because you didn't think the way I did. Until I learned that you couldn't possibly think the way I think because you're not me with long hair,
Yeah.
If you get my drift, because I can't ring HR. You can't possibly think like me. And did a lot of research on that. So there's a guy, and I just want to say this for anybody that wants to learn this information because he's funny. Guy's name is Mark Gunger. He does a YouTube video about 13 minutes long if you want to get the gist of what he says. I went online and ordered some videos to show my girls when we were all getting together, because the big issue with the girls are usually the guys they're with, right?
Yeah, right.
So anyway, it's called The Tale of Two Brains, T-A-L-E of Two Brains, and he's a marriage counselor / minister / stand-up comedian. And I heard about this guy a long time ago, back before we had Facebook or anything, and one of my male friends sent me the little link to the video before we even had YouTube. And guy was so funny. Oh my God, he was funny. And then somebody else had mentioned him again. And I thought, oh yeah. I need to get this. And so I forced my significant other to watch it with me. And he did like all the men in the video that are sitting here with their arms crossed. My wife dragging me this damn, I'm going to And within 5 seconds, those guys were laughing their head off. So he explains the difference in the male brain and the female brain in such a way that is comical.
Yeah.
And it was very, very helpful to Tom and I to understand why sometimes he does things that I absolutely can't fathom. Now I know. And now it's fun. And now we have little buzzwords we use with each other because of that video that keep it real and light. And remind us that we ain't wrong, we're just different. And
you said the buzzwords, somebody has introduced me of late in the last, something I've been offering people that I'm working with. Safe words, I call them, but they're probably, so that they can lighten the situation up when things get into areas of that are not okay to go in right now. And just so that then it can be something funny. And
now, what is
just I tell couples to make up their own. Come up with something that means something to them. Come up with something. And so that you got something that you can both kind of laugh at when it gets hollered out and break the tension. I'll hesitate a little bit, but I'll go ahead and do it. I don't know why I would not hesitate. So I sponsor one gal who I also am really good friends with, her husband. And so, there's those things going on there that she's trying to work her work, and he knows how she should work her work. And the guy who listens to it, he's one of my super fans, so he'll know what I'm talking about. He knows I'm just joking, but I think he'll understand what I'm saying at the same time. And they need something to cut that. Well, just like everything else in this, sometimes we got to let people have their process, right, and let them do their journey. And muddling in that usually is not the right thing to do. So they've got a really cool, fun, safe word, and I'll let that be left secret. I'll share it to you afterwards. But something to do that. And my friend Shane is one who he has one with his. That's where I picked it up as some way to, with humor, say, hey, we're not going to go there right now. Without going, because you can do that like in mixed company and nobody knows what you're talking about, right? But if you go, shut your effing, that don't fly, or the other stuff, and they get to break the tension without making a scene, And especially, here's another thing: this is like in front of their children. That's a terrible thing to do that. The one thing my mom and dad were rarely ever argued or fought or anything. But the few times. I do remember.
Because you remember the negative stuff.
Yeah. Yep. So it's a cool tool, and if you're using that, so his name was Mark Gunger.
G-U-N-G. Yeah. Tale of Two Brains.
I just feed my brain today.
That's what I do.
If it seems like something, and I listen, and when somebody mentions something, I mentally note it. It's another one of these gift things that my little computer up here is working pretty good nowadays.
Well, I mention it because the thing that I do know is there are people that if you told me I should read it, if you told me I should read something, I'd read it. Now, if somebody else told me I should read something, I might not read it. But if you told me I should read it, I would read it. Right, and so I fully expect that you'll look this guy up.
I will.
Watch that 13-minute YouTube video.
You just talk about this other stuff. I don't think that happens by accident. That's shared with me today. That's shared with me because I'm supposed to do that.
Came out of nowhere.
We were talking earlier about something about praying for help. You said you pray for 2 years to not get drunk.
Not get drunk.
You want to drink but not get drunk. I prayed for God to stop me because I knew my drinking was out of control, and it was sometime short of my 38th birthday, which would have been quite a while before I hit an AA meeting, a few years before my first one. And man, I really did. And I remember asking, do something to stop this train wreck. And I was coming home I did a really great job at work one day, kicked a lot of tail, decided to go out treat myself afterwards. Ended up way too drunk and was on my way home, and I got pulled over and got my third DUI at 38 years on my 38th birthday. My third. I got one when I was 16, one when I was 19. I went 19 more years without getting another one. I didn't even know. I remember being shocked when I handed my driver's license to the in-processing thing, and the guy looked up and said, "Happy birthday." I didn't even dawn on me that it was my birthday. And, of course, I told the cop that in the back seat of the car. I've been praying that that something would happen to stop me. And it wasn't like, a couple weeks later. Oh, well, that wasn't it. That couldn't have been it. And keep on going. And I know, your prayer was answered.
Well, I'd stop every year for Lent because that guy that I was with at the time who had the alcoholic father, just to prove to him that I wasn't an alcoholic, and also we had a nurse friend that said if you're a real alcoholic, you can't quit for more than 4 days, or you go into DTs.
Yeah.
Now that's not really the real definition, and I learned that later, but that's what she said. So if I could go 4 days without drinking, I could continue to prove to myself that I wasn't an alcoholic, and I never wanted to be one. I mean, I remember watching that. There was a movie with Dick Van Dyke when I was younger, where he was the alcoholic under the bridge, and then there was another one with Jack Nicholson, where he had come home drunk, threw his baby up in the air and didn't catch it, killed it, and then, ended up being a street person living in his car. And then there was another one with Nicolas Cage. I don't know if you saw that one. And so I watched enough of those movies that I knew I didn't want to do that. And I did have an alcoholic grandfather that committed suicide and when I was about 17. No, he did it after my dad got killed.
After?
Yeah. Within a year after my dad got killed, my grandfather, who was an alcoholic, who had quit drinking, but, he was miserable. And then my dad got killed, and then he shot himself, killed himself. So, I always knew that alcoholism could progress in my life if I let it, so I was very cautious. And I just prayed to God to keep me quit from getting drunk, right? I just don't want to get drunk. And please let me go back to that ability to have 2 drinks and not feel like I have to drink anymore. I wanted him to put me back to that 2 drinks that I remember experiencing at the Ruth Chris that night.
Yeah.
I drank 2 drinks with the clients for dinner, and I did not want anymore. So it took a lot longer to progress, and I couldn't do it. And here's your sign every week in that bulletin.
Yeah,
'cause
I went through
to
that
church
too
there
for a
every
long
week.
time.
Here's your sign.
And I didn't want to be at church on Sunday morning. I was doing it was to make her happy.
Well, I wanted to go to church.
Yeah, I didn't.
I
was
loved
still
that church.
hungover. I was drinking hard. Saturday night was not. There wasn't a Saturday night for a lot of years where I wasn't, passed out drunk by the time I stopped in the evening, and whether if it was at home or out.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to do is get up in the morning and wrestle 2 kids around and get them out the door, especially we had babies.
Yeah.
And get them to church and then go sit in there.
Love that church.
And I had nothing against that. This was all my alcoholism, not wanting to go to church. But I go to church. Even at times, I would pass on that bulletin. Because that's another one of the things. You almost feel like you lend their hand to you that you should take one. There's a little bit of me that's like, we don't both need one. No, that way I wouldn't have to see that in there.
It's not a bulletin anymore.
Yeah.
It's just a note card.
Yeah, whatever. It
Doesn't
was,
have
it
all
used to
that-
actually fold and stuff
Yeah,
and
it used
had
to have-
quite a, like one page, like a half a page of it would be like support group information and different things going on at the church and other things, and it would have AA. Well, of course, at that church at one point in time, there was Al-Anon, AA, Alateen, and NA going on all at the same time.
They want you to go to the website now, and they do still have a lot of support groups. They have
Well, I
a
burn
lot
all
of
that paper, right?
They just want it all on the website. So they give you a note card when you go
That's
in
the way the
now.
world is going. Everything is, that's the way
Well,
everything is now. You can't be on the soccer team at school without having this app, and you can't be on, and here and there, and
That change. That
yeah.
damn change again.
have to
I
make
hate change.
had to make my kids' doctor's appointments through some other little app, and you had to.
Better than calling and not getting an answer.
Yeah, it actually is. It's pretty convenient, but you had to get, and divorced parents. It's tough to work that out because HIPAA and and you have to make sure everybody's on board because there's some dads out there that moms don't want on that account, right? Out in the world.
Oh yeah.
So then that makes so that makes it a little more difficult to get on, because I had to make sure that
You got to be permission.
and
Yeah,
vice
they gotta-
versa. Same thing can happen the other way around. It's certainly not a one-way street there, but yeah, everybody sends you to the computer now.
How old is your youngest?
My youngest, 14.
Okay. So you
Dustin
still got a
is
ways to go
16.
before they're old enough that you don't have to get that permission yet.
Yep. Yeah. Dustin will start driving in a minute. They're both in the house.
Lovely young people.
Yeah, thank you.
Lovely young people. So
Yeah, them teenage years are fun.
yeah. I don't know about
Dustin
you.
loves to work.
Does
That's
he?
one thing I never thought that would be, I don't know, but he's got a little job up there at the Pizza King up, on Charleston Road and 265 up there, and he has never once, he's had to call in sick, and he's like bummed about it, man. Like, wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Oh, they're lovely young people.
Did his taxes yesterday for
He
the first
did?
time ever,
He's only 14.
Yeah. You don't have to do, but you don't have to pay no taxes. So they withhold anyway, right? So he gets all his tax
So he
money
gets it
back,
back.
all of it back. I ain't giving that away.
But
I'll
I
sit
didn't-
down and do his taxes.
I guess since I grew up in Kentucky, I didn't know you could work at 14 in Indiana.
No, he's 16.
Oh, he's 16. Your daughter's 14.
Yeah. She wants a
Okay.
job so bad she can't see straight.
Well, sure
Except for
does.
she doesn't want to stay home on Friday and Saturday nights when all my friends want babysitters. I can get you jobs.
That's not
It's
what
just
she
not
had in
when
mind.
you want them.
No, she got things to do then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a darling. She's a darling. And I enjoyed watching your family grow just like you.
Yeah, and that really was,
enjoyed it.
man. I mean, I will never forget those days, and I've told this story on here before, but, going out there and they had an Alateen, and it was actually Renee, the same person that said, why don't you see if the kids will go over there? And I know everything. They're not teenagers. It's Alateen, dummy. She goes over and asks. They say, sure, they can come. Let me talk to them for a minute and make sure, let's see. Krista took one look in that room and said, I ain't going in there. I said, okay, well, you're going to have to go with me because I had an ankle bracelet on, and when they were with me, they had to go with me, and if that meant going to meetings and that kind of stuff, I had to do what I had to do, and they were going to have to sit in the hallway or whatever. And Dustin said, Dustin, is it to do? You go, will you go try that? Yeah, whatever, Dad. So he started going. Chris sat out in the hallway, and every week I'd go pick up Chris after dance and take her to that meeting, and I go, you have 3 choices. You can go in a meeting with Dustin. You can come in the meeting with me, because our meeting was pretty safe. There's some meetings, of course, they were like 8 and 10 then. She was like 8.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be necessarily something I'd necessarily want to take my kids into necessarily, not at that age. That meeting was not one of those. I felt safe enough. Yeah, there might be some little extreme language once in a while, but it wasn't bad. Nothing they didn't hear out of me already. And you can go in a meeting with me, go in a meeting with Dustin. You can sit here in the hallway, and she sat there in the hallway week after week after week after week. And then one day on the way to the meeting, I pick her up at dance, head to the Seekers meeting, and she said, "Hey, Dad," and I was like, "What?" I can still remember. It's one of the things you'll never forget. And she said, "Hey, Dad." I said, "Yeah, what?" She goes, "Think I can go to that meeting tonight?" The L team meeting? She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'm sure you can." She goes, "Yeah, I think I want to. I think I want to." I said, "Okay." And she said, "You think they'll let me sit with Dustin?" And I said, "Yeah." Now I later found out that a lot of times they won't let siblings sit next to each other because they won't stop bugging each other.
Oh.
But apparently that didn't end up being the case. And this is the other thing I can remember after a meeting. Remember, we'd be fellowshipping in our meeting area. And when they let out, my kids would come over and hang out in the room with us until we were to leave, And I can still remember that day she come busting through those double doors on the right, closest to the kitchen. Looked like there was 3 inches of air underneath of her feet. And she'd come right up to me and she said, "I love it." And she was on fire with that for a while, and it really did. I mean, and it's that seed planting stuff, you never know what this stuff will do. Because, like, Happy's another one, grew up in Alateen, but took the course anyway, went the way he went, so you can't ever, I speak about that on the podcast quite often, about this powerless thing about our children, that's powerlessness is like, have a kid. Think you're going to control that little thing. No. But I know that it has played a big role in who she is today, both kids who they've turned into being today because of that. And I sometimes have wondered, but I'll just say, again, I don't know why I even begin to like censor it, but both of them are at the age where their friends and stuff are smoking dope and doing stuff.
Sure they are. And,
at 14 is when I first started drinking and doing other kind of things, smoking dope. And they actually talked to me about it. I wouldn't have talked to my mom and dad about that for nothing.
My son came to me and scared to death. He has the same anxiety disorder that his mother does. He's scared to death. He smoked pot, and he thought he was going to be brain damaged for the rest of his life. I think he probably only did it once because it scared him so bad, but he likes his bourbon. Yeah. He's 29 years old. He likes his bourbon. And I just pray that he won't go down the path I did.
Yeah. You can't necessarily saddle him up with that just because you drink. Sometimes that's just the path we had to do, too, I mean, when them people first started saying, almost cliches now, but then I first started hearing them people say, "Thank God I'm an alcoholic." But today, I wouldn't have what I have in my life today if it hadn't have been for slamming into a wall and getting this program as a way to operate today.
We wouldn't have any friends.
Yeah.
Not any real ones. I mean, I still have friends. I was very fortunate that I had really good friends.
Mine have pretty much completely turned over, and I won't say, it's not that they're not friends. They are friends, in case they're listening to this, but, I can't be aligned with that today, and I don't know what would happen long term. My alcoholism was starting to drive me into an isolation type of thing because, I needed, people knew I had a problem, and I needed to not let them see that. So that meant drinking in isolation and hiding and not letting you see all that. So I would end up driving that direction. So if I had you're probably right. Any friends, I was abandoning them. But yeah, now the friends I have, yeah, crazy.
Well, you never have to be alone again.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of the program. I mean, it's everywhere.
I can't hardly get along.
I can go to a 12-step meeting and fit into any of them, except for maybe Gamblers Anonymous. I never went that route, but...
I never did do that either. That's something I never did. You've been talking about anxiety, man. I could sit and shoot pool, and we put $1 on the table, I'm going to pot. Nothing like gambling will shoot my anxiety through the roof. I cannot gamble.
I did go to the boat for a while, and one time I broke my rule and went back and got some more money out of the ATM machine, and it was something I could afford to lose. But I walked out of there thinking, I got this person in my life that could have used that money. And that was God's way of keeping me from getting into that addiction. Because from that day forward, I didn't even even when I won, I didn't feel good.
Yeah.
It was like, if I want to give away that kind of money, why don't I give it to somebody that needs it?
Yeah.
And so he stopped me from going down that road. But I sure have that sugar addiction now. Because alcohol's all sugar.
Yeah.
That's all it is anyway, sugar.
Yep, and it does. It changes the way you feel. That's what, that's kind of like how you don't like certain stuff, how we find in our drug of choices or whatever, whether it is and why I'm not a gambler. That gambling drug did not make me feel good.
No,
made me feel bad.
Made me feel bad.
And some people alcohol makes them feel bad, but they're eating a lot.
Well, my first line of defense from drinking again is, right now I'm not doing any recreational sugar because it's Lent, and my first line of defense is M&Ms. So I'll do that first. And if I get so irritable, restless, fearful, and I don't get enough meetings, then I would smoke a cigarette before I'd go back to booze. I do know that I have...
Were you a smoker?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But that was another one of those, started when I was 16, kept trying to quit when I was 17, right? Once that addiction got a hold of me, man, I still crave it to this day, and I haven't had a cigarette since 2005. And I still crave it to this day, and I have empathy for these drug addicts because that craving for that nicotine is still there since 2005.
Yeah, that's unreal.
And those people that get addicted to that particular line of drugs, I understand that craving is just as bad as nicotine.
Yep,
and it never goes away.
Yeah.
And I really pray for those people because by some miracles, I didn't go down that path. And
Nick, I'm frankly as proud of my nicotine quit, or maybe prouder of my nicotine. It felt harder. I don't really know if it was or not, but it felt harder to stop nicotine than it did to stop drinking and doping.
Physically, it was harder. And I've done it 100 times. The longest I've made it so far now is this since 2005. But I quit one time for 8 years and went back. So when people would come back in the rooms, Alcoholics Anonymous, after not having partaken in booze for a while, and then going back out, I had empathy for them too. I mean, I knew, but I had the same problem with cigarettes, and never let myself smoke more than a pack a day. I had all these rules that I was never going to cross those lines, and I really fought that addiction hard. And so 2005 is when I gave that up, and 2007 is when I gave up alcohol. And then I said, hey, what if I go back to Weight Watchers? If I'm not drinking, it'll probably be easier because I spend all my bonus points on booze, right?
Yeah.
So I go back to Weight Watchers and lose the weight, and then step on the scale at goal weight, and haven't seen that size since, right? I mean, it's like buy new clothes, boom, right back up again. So it's like, well, okay, that didn't work, and so because I thought now I got the key. The magic key to Weight Watchers is to keep coming back, keep going to meetings, and I kept going, and I was putting on weight, and I kept going, I was putting on weight. Lucy was the woman over there, and this was during the 08-09 financial catastrophe, and I work in the financial business, and I was putting on weight, and she said, what the heck's going on, Becky? I said, I work for so-and-so, and she said, say no more. My dad thinks the world's coming to an end. So at some point, I finally quit paying to get on that scale and have to.
Yeah, share the walk of shame, yeah.
So I'm still struggling with that when I ask God to, take this desire to eat away now, but it sure is fun.
Yeah, I can. Right now, I'm working, and actually, what I'm probably doing right now is I'm not eating enough.
I noticed that when I walked in.
And my days are spent working, and I don't feel like taking a break to go eat, and I don't like packing a lunch anymore. I used to do really good at that when I sat at a desk. I was really good at packing a lunch when I sat at a desk. Going out and doing this, and I don't want to go eat the fast food, and that's all that's out there really from that perspective. So I still have yet to find a solution for it.
Yeah, I'm doing the fast food because I have to eat because I get that, shakiness and all that. And
I don't know how I'm operating on it. If I started looking at my calories, I am frankly not eating enough.
I couldn't do that. My significant other can go all day without eating and not get that feeling, but I get that feeling that really irritable and what they call it, hangry, is the term they use now. Today's terms.
Yeah.
And so I have to eat something. So I have to resort to whatever's available. So I try to keep stuff in my office that's not bad, but it's hard to do. It's hard to do. I don't stay home enough to cook. I mean,
that's the same
I
thing
can.
Here.
And I'm not too bad at it, but I don't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, same here. I just don't cook much.
Now, as old as I am, we're getting way past my bedtime already.
Yeah.
Not that it is, but by the time I get home and get settled in, it'll take me a while to decompress.
Well, I didn't want to stop you at all because I watched the clock a little bit over here and I see how long they're going.
Well, and I just realized there's a clock up there, and I thought, man, Dan and I, you and I could talk all night.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like there are people in this program you can do that with, and I apologize to anybody that's listening.
People will say, for a while they would say that, and my favorite, what I got the podcasting bug off of is Joe Rogan. He goes 3 hours all the time.
Does he?
And I will sit and listen to it, and a pause button, and I can pick it up after a while, and people go, well, I can't listen to that long. I thought, nobody can. There's very few people can listen to something 3 hours long. You don't bite it all off at once. You do it a little at a time. But I know a lot of people that do this, that sit down and listen to this thing. I mean, there's a lot of people who sit down and listen to this thing on Sunday morning when it comes out.
That God thing showed me how to listen to it in my car.
Yeah.
And then when I get out, it stops. When I get back in, it starts right back up.
Right back up where it left off, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like, that was a God thing.
Yeah.
I'm telling you it was a God thing because that's my meeting in the car. And I thank you for that. I really thank you.
You're welcome. It tickled me big time.
I shared it in last week's meeting, and your brother was there.
Yeah, that's another miracle. You talked about your brothers, and I didn't do anything to point him this direction.
Yeah, well, you helped my nephew too. I mean, you pointed him in the right direction.
Yeah,
right. You did, and I'm very, forever grateful for that. And he used Celebrate Recovery at his church to get sober. He liked that better, and that worked for him.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you, reaching out to him and helping him, taking him on his wing, and telling him your story a little bit because he needed that little kick, and he's doing real good right now.
Yeah, I see it. I'm friends with him on Facebook. I see it looks,
good.
And you can look at somebody and tell whether if they're okay or not.
Yeah, you can. I'm grateful for him. We got to be quiet. So these people need to get off their podcast and get to work. They're probably shirking some responsibility somewhere if they're still listening to us.
So yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I love you. I have felt that connection from the beginning, and the support that you've given me is something that I don't know how it just can't be expressed in words. How appreciative and how grateful I am to have you walk into my life one Wednesday night on a night I needed somebody like you.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people been there for us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why when somebody says, help him, or even hints, it may not be that language, but that's what I hear. Mm-hmm. I go, okay, saddle up. We're going to go see if we can help. I don't know if God wants me to help him or not. I'm going to try. We'll see. So appreciate you. Thanks for coming in here tonight. Any final words? Good. So, we'll clear it up like I always do. If you're not having a blast in your recovery, it's your own damn fault. That comes off the bottom of the Daily Ponderables. It is a daily reader, so I lifted that too, like a lot of this stuff. And finally, like I said a little while ago about Happy's story and Happy telling me that night, thank you all for allowing us, to participate in our recovery in this manner tonight. Peace out.
Always tried to be just who they wanted. Always tried to do everything they said. Only did the things they would approve of. lock away all your dreams inside your head. Year after year you try to be a good girl. They never failed to point out when you were bad. Stuck to the program like a robot. Became a trophy for mom and dad. But inside you want more. Everything you've been waiting for. Looking for that open door. So every day in your bed, in your heart just keeps saying, let go and fly. Let go and fly. Spread your wings to the sky. Let go and fly. Ever since you was a little boy, they told you, suck it up and be a man. It's time to put away your baby toys. Make your mom have a plan.